It all begins in a military camp under the light of a bright full moon as soldiers prepare for combat. Inside a dark tent, a young warrior intently examines his own sword by the light of a lone candle. While carefully cleaning the gleaming blade, the young man reflects on how that weapon is the ultimate proof of his loyalty. His entire existence boils down to the promise he made to faithfully serve the powerful Lord Atlas. The young man displays a serious and focused gaze as he firmly grips the hilt of his gleaming sword. Suddenly a voice echoes from outside calling Zeno's name, interrupting his thoughts. Upon hearing the call, the young man immediately stood up to pay his respects to his superior. The imposing Lord Atlas enters the tent wearing gleaming armor and staring intently at the young warrior. The leader warns that they will advance at dawn and orders Zeno to lead the front line to break through the enemy defenses. He demands that the boy bring him the head of the enemy general to definitively secure the glory of his noble family. With an intimidating look, the Lord makes it clear that he will not tolerate failure, while the young man simply listens in silence. Then Zeno remembers the cold, snowy day in the past when he was rescued by that powerful man. He was nearly dying in the snow when the Lord appeared and extended his hand to give him a new reason to live. That moment changed the young man's life forever when he opened his eyes and saw that there was a chance of salvation. From that day on, the boy swore in his heart that his entire life would belong exclusively to his savior. Remembering all this gratitude, the warrior closes his eyes and mentally prepares to fulfill the mission. Zeno then reaffirms that he will carry out each of his master's orders without hesitating for a second. The leader leaves the tent, leaving the young warrior alone with his thoughts and ready for combat. Looking at his gleaming blade, the boy prepares to face the cruel fate that awaits him on the battlefield. Once on the battlefield, the young man advances with extreme speed, cutting down enemies with deadly blows. He spins his blade with terrifying precision, spilling the blood of those who cross his path. With a merciless and focused gaze, the warrior continues his massacre without showing any sign of weakness. Zeno pauses for a moment, surrounded by the bodies of defeated enemy soldiers, his sword dripping blood. Suddenly, the boy hears the rumble of horses approaching rapidly and realizes a new threat is emerging. Even alone, the warrior stands firm to face the fearsome cavalry charging towards him. The leader of the enemy group displays a sadistic and confident smile, believing he will easily crush the young man. At that moment, the young man reflected on all the sacrifices he had made throughout his life to raise that noble family. The physical exertion begins to take its toll, and the warrior finds himself forced to fight even while spitting blood. He knows that his sword of loyalty was forged at the cost of the extreme wear and tear on his own soul. To halt the advance of the mounted enemies, the boy concentrates all his remaining energy on a single point of the blade. With a mysterious smile, the warrior prepares to activate his most devastating technique, known as the Phantom Shadow. Trails of light and illusory clones appear in the air, completely confusing the enemy knights in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye, the enemies are completely torn to shreds and blood splatters everywhere. In the distance, other allied soldiers watch the scene in shock, commenting that that monstrous style doesn't belong to their family. The strain of the technique is overwhelming and causes the young man to vomit a large amount of blood due to the extreme effort. Instead of helping the allied soldiers, they walk away with disdain and tell everyone not to come near that low-class trash. Zeno tries to catch his breath while listening to new tremors in the ground, indicating that the battle is not yet over. He raises his head in fright, realizing that more enemies are marching towards him, giving him no time to rest. A second massive wave of heavy cavalry appears on the horizon, advancing relentlessly against the exhausted warrior. The young man realizes the extreme danger of the situation as he notices his lord observing everything from the top of a distant hill. He looks at his weapon and calculates that he only has enough energy left to perform that special technique one more time. Sweating from exhaustion, the warrior searches the horizon for his master's gaze, hoping to receive some sign of support. From atop the hill, the imposing Lord Atlas remains mounted on his horse, observing the suffering of his servant without lifting a finger. The leader's cold gaze makes it clear that he doesn't care about the boy's life and only expects him to do his duty. Feeling the weight of that indifference, the warrior simply accepts his cruel fate and prepares for the ultimate sacrifice. Even knowing it could be his end, the young man once again advances towards danger to obey his master's will. He decides to fight until his last breath, even if it costs him his own life in the process. Meanwhile, the leader continues to watch everything from afar with a cold and utterly ruthless demeanor. Gathering his last strength, the boy throws himself against the enemies in a desperate attack in the name of his master. From his high vantage point, the Lord observes the violent combat with a somber look, indicating that everything is going exactly as planned. A mysterious and intense golden light begins to emanate from the boy's body as he advances against the army. Upon noticing the glow, the Lord decides that the time has come to act before his servant becomes too powerful to control. Without hesitation, the cruel leader orders his subordinate mages to immediately activate the prepared spell to restrain the boy. A terrifying explosion of dark magic occurs on the battlefield, ensnaring the young warrior in a deadly trap. The warrior cries out in surprise as he is completely enveloped by the purple chains of a powerful sealing matrix. Feeling his strength waning, he looks back, unable to understand why he was betrayed by his own companions. The terrifying dark energy begins to burn the young man's body, completely suppressing his latent spiritual power. The suffering is so great that the boy ends up spitting up a large amount of blood because of the oppressive spell. The young warrior lets out an agonizing cry of extreme pain as the malevolent energy consumes his remaining strength. An enemy soldier approaches, wielding a huge axe and mocking the tragic situation of the boy lying on the ground. The enemy warrior calls the young man a monster and raises his heavy weapon to deliver the killing blow. The young man screams in pain as he is violently struck by the executioner's brutal attack, while blood spurts onto the ground. Laughing, the executioner reveals that he is merely fulfilling the deal he made with the boy's own master to finish him off there. Zeno is shocked to realize that it was his beloved lord who planned everything. While he hears heavy footsteps approaching, with bloodshot eyes, the boy tries to look up to meet the imposing figure that slowly approaches. The imposing silhouette of Lord Atlas looms before him, clad in dark armor and exuding a relentless aura. The cruel leader stops right in front of the wounded boy and calls him by name in a completely cold and distant tone of voice. Zeno raises his gaze, filled with pain and sadness, internally pleading for an explanation for such cruelty. Without showing a shred of compassion, the man curtly informs the young man that his role in that war ends there. Gasping for air, the boy asks with difficulty why he is being discarded so brutally by his master. In his final moments, the young man tries to reach the man he always considered to be his own father. The leader looks at the orphan with disdain and tells him not to jump to conclusions about the relationship that existed between the two. He cruelly reveals that he never thought of the boy as a real son. During all those years of living together, the man emphasizes that he never had feelings for the orphan while the young man's blood flows and mixes with his tears. The Lord recounts that from the first day he found the boy nearly lifeless in the snow, he already had dark plans. At that time, the young man lay stretched out on the cold ground, about to freeze to death, with no hope of survival. The man confesses that upon seeing the boy, he immediately realized he would be an excellent tool for his plans. The plan was simpler: just give the orphan a reason to live, so that he would show blind loyalty like a dog. To the nobleman, the boy was never more than a convenient and disposable sword that would be used until it lost its usefulness. However, the leader admits that the tool has become too powerful to continue controlling. The young man possessed an extraordinary spiritual energy, a quality he had carried since childhood within that grand mansion. The master confesses that he used every resource at his disposal to contain the growth of that colossal power. He gave the boy mysterious potions to drink with the sole purpose of suppressing that dangerous force as much as possible. However, the barrier reached its limit, and that bright light from before was definitive proof that the power had overflowed. The man says it was only a matter of time before the young man rebelled, but the boy whispers that he would never dream of betraying his master. With the last of his strength, the warrior desperately shouts that his loyalty was genuine and that he would never do such a thing. The executioner kicks him violently to silence him, causing more blood to splatter across the devastated battlefield. The executioner complains about the noise, while the Lord decides to reveal the true meaning behind the name he gave the boy. The cruel nobleman coldly reveals that the young man's name actually means simply disposable sword in his native tongue. Upon hearing the revelation, the soldiers and the leader begin to laugh at the misfortune of the young man, who lies crying on the dirt floor. With his body completely destroyed, the boy can no longer move and collapses, defeated into his own pool of blood. The warrior lays his head on the cold ground as he feels life slowly draining from his wounded and betrayed body. In his final thoughts, the young man laments having dedicated his entire life and his sword to that merciless man. He remembers how he handed his soul over on a platter to a selfish master, who now looks at him with profound contempt. The young man's hand weakly slips to the side, indicating that he is finally about to take his last breath. Suddenly, the executioner recoiled in fright, sensing a sudden change in the air around the fallen warrior. Even on the brink of death, the young man grips the hilt of his sword tightly and begins to whisper the name of his special technique. A golden, bright spark reappears in the boy's eyes, indicating that he will fight to the end with his last strength. He lets out a final, weak, almost imperceptible breath as his vision goes completely dark in the mud. The young man's head falls lifeless onto the bloodied ground, marking the tragic end of his journey of blind loyalty. The executioner begins to laugh, saying that the boy had frightened him greatly, before raising his axe again. Calling the young man a stupid monster, the enemy warrior prepares the final blow, while Zeno reflects on his life. The boy realizes that his entire existence has served only to treat him as a disposable tool. Under the cold gaze of Lord Atlas and the entire army, the executioner delivers the fatal blow to end the young man's life. Fallen amidst his own blood, the young warrior finally dies, wondering what he had fought for all his life. A warm sensation then envelops him, causing him to glimpse the coat of arms of the legendary Elminster family of wizards. A gentle hand touches his body and a sweet, welcoming voice affectionately announces that he has finally woken up. A beautiful blonde woman smiles very affectionately, calling the young warrior her sweet baby. The boy opens his eyes in shock, unable to believe that the woman is referring to him as a newborn. In shock, he widens his newly yellow eyes, trying to understand what on earth is happening to him in that place. As the warrior tries to move, he is completely surprised to notice that his hands are now tiny, like those of a baby. He realizes that he has in fact been reincarnated in the body of a helpless child and wonders what will happen to him. He then discovers that the continent is divided between House Arclight, which worships the sword, and the powerful Elminster family. This new family into which he was reborn is famous for considering magic as the supreme and absolute power of the entire world. The founder of this lineage of mages was so powerful that he could create entire continents with a single spell. The young man finds it ironic that he has been reincarnated into the very family that is the opposite of the one that idolized the sword in his past life. Even though the child appears to be sleeping peacefully, it feels a gigantic source of magical energy vibrating in its chest. He wakes up startled, feeling this immense power pulsing intensely through his new, tiny veins. The little warrior focuses his attention on this mysterious and overwhelming sensation that he had never experienced before. He realizes that he possesses an infinite and incredibly powerful amount of spiritual energy within himself. This is the true, unimaginable power that his cruel former master tried to suppress with potions in his previous life. A vengeful smile appears on the baby's face as he realizes that the heavens have finally decided to give him a second chance. He now possesses the perfect lineage and the ideal environment to finally reach the top of the world with his newfound power. The boy decides to use every resource available to him to become strong and begin his journey of revenge. His sole and greatest objective from now on is to make the cruel Lord Atlas pay for all the treachery of the past. To complete his plan, he first needs to assume absolute control of the power of this new family of mages. Meanwhile, the baby is bombarded with luxurious toys and excessive pampering by the servants of the immense mansion. A veritable crowd of servants gathers around him to present the finest delicacies and royal gifts. The mansion's chef approaches with a smile, bringing a special drink prepared exclusively for the boy. This is a sacred food made with sap harvested directly from the legendary world tree to strengthen the baby. Little Lucius is completely taken aback when he sees the cook insisting that he open his mouth and drink the beverage. Next, the maid offers a rattle made of the purest gold, which has received the energy of all the maids in the mansion. She recounts that all the servants spent the entire night infusing their own magical power into that precious toy. The employees begin to comically argue over who can best please the young heir of the prestigious family. This whole bizarre situation makes the boy's beautiful mother laugh and smile at her servants' behavior. She gently asks everyone to calm down so they don't end up scaring or suffocating little Lucius with so much attention. The loving mother strokes her son's head and asks if he agrees with her while the baby stares at her silently. Upon receiving affection, the boy remembers the cruel words of his former master and decides not to be deceived. He knows very well what it's like to be an abandoned orphan and is immediately suspicious of any display of affection. The boy believes that all the love he receives now is motivated solely by his immense potential for magic. He recalls her painful death and decides it's best not to create false hopes regarding family affection. Even so, the baby decides to use this luxurious and favorable environment to grow strong and achieve his revenge in the future. A week has passed since his reincarnation, and the young warrior in the body of a baby has already managed to realize something crucial. Sitting on his enormous bed, little Lucius observes the luxurious room while calmly drinking his bottle. The boy realizes that the teaching methods and magical power of that family surpass all his initial expectations. Even the milk he drinks daily is magically prepared by the maids to contain an absurd amount of spiritual energy. The housekeeper brings the sacred food with a broad smile on her face, under the wary gaze of the other servants in the mansion. Furthermore, the lullabies sung by her mother contain complex, magical formulas disguised within the gentle melody. The maids watch the little hare lying in bed and pray together that he grows up strong and very healthy. Despite finding it a little strange to have to act like a helpless child, the boy decides to accept his new reality. Alone in his crib, little Lucius decides that the time has finally come to test the extent of his current power. He remembers that the true essence of his legendary technique lies in concentrating all his energy into a single point. This was the same tactic the young man had used in his past life to deliver deadly blows with his sword. With great determination, the baby prepares to put every drop of its energy under its absolute and perfect control. The boy begins to channel his magical power, causing a strong bluish light to emanate from his small hands. Suddenly, an immense column of blue spiritual energy shoots up towards the ceiling of the room, illuminating everything. A beam of magical energy exploded out of the enormous mansion, streaking across the night sky and startling everyone in the area. In the kitchen, the cook and his assistants are completely terrified by the sudden tremor caused by the magic. The boy's mother and the maids also feel the impact of the strong energy that makes the entire structure of the mansion tremble slightly. The immense blue glow spreads like a shooting star, illuminating the entire neighboring city with an absurd intensity. Lying in bed, little Lucius is shocked to see that his magical power has grown frighteningly in just 1 week. He realizes that if he can control all this colossal force, he will have the perfect tool for his revenge. A wicked smile appears on the baby's face, who is already coldly and precisely planning his next steps. Worried by the loud bang, the loving mother runs desperately through the mansion's corridors accompanied by her maid. She bursts open the doors to her son's son's room, shouting Lucius's name because of the loud noise from before. The two women enter the room but find it completely silent with no apparent sign of danger. Relieved, the mother realizes the baby is fast asleep and thinks it was all just her imagination. She watches her son fondly, sweetly wondering what such a small and adorable child might be dreaming about. The next day, the woman rests peacefully in her rocking chair while breastfeeding her son near the window. Suddenly, the red-haired maid bursts into the main hall, screaming desperately to get her mistress's attention. Housekeeper Fran displays a look of utter panic. She tries to catch her breath to deliver terrible news. The noble mother calmly asks her employee to remain calm and gently inquires about the serious incident that is occurring at the mansion. The maid reveals that an appraiser sent directly by the imperial family has just arrived at the gates of the property. Upon hearing the word evaluator, little Lucius immediately becomes suspicious, wondering about the reason for the surprise visit. The boy's mother is quite worried because the head of the family is traveling and they live in an isolated area. The baby immediately deduces that the Empire detected his burst of magical power from the previous night and realizes that everything has become complicated. All the servants of the mansion gather in the great main hall to receive the mysterious and dreaded imperial visitors. The noble lady sits on the throne, protecting her small child in her arms with a rather apprehensive expression. Three mysterious men wearing long black hooded cloaks enter the main hall of the residence imposingly. The mother stands up to greet the hooded men, trying to remain calm in the face of their intimidating presence. The mysterious visitors walk slowly and in a coordinated manner along the red carpet, drawing the attention of all the servants. The noble lady hugs her baby tighter, feeling a great tension in the air as the strangers approach her. The leader of the visitors greeted the noble woman coldly, immediately breaking the tense silence that hung over the place. He advises them that they can dispense with the formalities because he brings with him an official decree coming directly from the Empire. The man reveals that the previous night, the Empire's spiritual surveillance network detected an anomaly in that region. The network detected an unprecedented burst of magical energy, something that happens only once every millennium in the world. With his long, sharp fingernails, the man points at the noble woman, asserting that the source of that energy lies within her. He asserts with absolute certainty that the mysterious and colossal source of power is hidden within that property. The maids began to whisper in fear, unable to imagine where such spiritual power could have come from. The evaluator warns that if their investigation determines that this source of power represents a serious threat to the Empire, they will be legally obligated to carry out the immediate purification, ruthlessly eliminating any danger. Hearing the word purification terrifies the female employees of the mansion, who fear the worst of them all. The hooded man coldly states that this is their only and most important mission as imperial evaluators. Then he pulls from his robes a mysterious, gleaming glass globe used to track magical energy. The employees watch the scene in complete apprehension as the man prepares to activate the power detector. The man claims that the powerful source of spiritual energy is definitely hidden inside that hall. He holds the glass globe firmly, waiting for the artifact to react and point to the one responsible for the loud bang. Suddenly, the magic object begins to glow intensely, indicating that it has indeed found the trail of hidden energy. The globe shoots out a beam of bright golden light that points directly at the mother holding little Lucius. The dreaded imperial appraiser faces the noble lady and says her name in an extremely serious and intimidating tone. The leader of the visitors politely asks the noble lady to step forward so they can administer the test. The noble mother silently agrees to the request while holding her baby tightly, before handing it over to the servant. She hands little Lucius over to one of her trusted servants and calmly says that everything will be all right in the end. The evaluator apologizes for his audacity and positions himself in front of the woman to begin the tracking process. He points the glass artifact towards the noble lady, hoping that the object will begin to react to his magical presence. The man is quite surprised to notice that the detector globe is not showing any direct reaction in relation to the noblewoman. He begins to look around with great suspicion, wondering where all that energy could really be coming from. Suddenly, the magic object begins to vibrate violently in the man's hand, emitting a very intense golden glow. The vibration becomes increasingly strong and uncontrolled, causing the man to grip the globe with both hands in shock. Colossal beam of golden light shoots directly from the object towards the other side of the hall where the servants are. The magic light points with surgical precision to the maid, who is holding little Lucius in her arms at that moment. The evaluator quickly approaches with a completely shocked look while carrying the object that continues to glow. The man begins to sweat profusely from terror upon realizing that the energy emanating from that direction is absurdly overwhelming. The spiritual pressure is so monstrous that it causes the precious glass globe to shatter completely in the hands of the envoy. The man is thrown backward by the impact of the small burst of golden light that spreads throughout the house's living room. The shards of glass fly through the air, while baby Lucius watches everything with an expression of utter boredom and indifference. The man screams in horror upon realizing who the true source of that immense force is, the force that shattered the imperial treasure. The noble mother and the mansion staff are completely paralyzed by the startled reaction of the empire's envoy. The evaluator points to the small child, unable to believe that a newborn could possess such immense power. The man shouts that this is absolutely impossible, while trying to recover from the shock of having witnessed such spiritual power. He reflects in horror on how an indestructible artifact could have been pulverized by the mere pressure of that baby's soul. Meanwhile, the young hare stares him with a cold and arrogant look that is completely unbecoming of a child's age. Determined to discover the truth, the man prepares to connect his own soul directly to the mind of the newborn. He activates a complex magic circle beneath his feet with the goal of reading the true essence of little Lucius's soul. However, the man lets out a groan of agonizing pain as he feels a terrible ricochet of energy that hits him by surprise. The envoy is utterly panicked upon realizing he has been violently repelled by the boy's natural soul barrier. In attempting to see into the child's mind, the man senses a spiritual presence infinitely superior to his own. He sees a sea of golden flames and realizes that the baby's power is so colossal that he can't even see its core. The reviewer describes the terrifying experience as if they were staring into the intense glare of the sun itself up close. An immense storm of fire consumes the evaluator's mind, leaving him completely paralyzed and unable to react in front of the boy. The worried mother runs towards the man and anxiously asks what he managed to see in her beloved son's soul. She and her maids await the answer with their hearts in their mouths, fearing for the safety of the family's young heir. The evaluator assumes a rather serious and somber expression, remembering the sacred duty of his position under orders from the empire. He remembers an ancient prophecy written in the early days of the empire to avert the emergence of a great threat. This ancient sacred book describes in detail the greatest calamity would be destined to destroy the entire nation in the future. Ancient scripture says that whoever carries the curse of the abyss in their sacred soul will bring eternal darkness to the empire. The man reveals with sorrow that the soul of little Lucius matches exactly the description of that terrible, destructive legend. The noble mother recoils in utter shock and cries out in despair that what the man is saying is absolutely impossible. The evaluator insists that the baby's soul carries the spark that will cause the ruin of everything under the authority of the imperial family. He orders his guards to act immediately to nip the evil in the bud, before that terrible threat can grow. The noble lady stands before everyone with a somber look, determined to protect her son from any external threat. Meanwhile, the young hare observes the enemy's movements with an extremely sharp and very dangerous gaze. The maids hug the baby tightly as the hooded imperial guards begin to aggressively surround the group. One of the imperial soldiers draws his gleaming sword from its sheath, intending to execute the child without hesitation. In this tense moment, the beautiful mother asks them to wait a moment and begins to emanate her own spiritual strength. An immense storm of bright petals and pink energy begins to float around the woman, startling the soldiers. Two immense wings of energy manifest behind her as she warns that she will never allow them to touch her beloved son. With eyes blazing with fury, Mrs. Elminster prepares to fight against the Empire's envoys to save her baby. The head of the evaluators asks, seriously, if the woman is truly willing to defy the sacred laws of the Empire. The boy's mother replies with pride that a single tear from her son is worth far more than all imperial laws. She gazes at the man with an imposing and majestic look, declaring firmly that this is exactly what it means to be a mother. Little Lucius is completely shocked and moved to see the unconditional love and courage of his new protective mother. The hooded man asks in a menacing tone if she is truly prepared to face the terrible consequences. The noble woman's pinergy wings glow intensely, creating a strong gust of wind that envelopes the entire great main hall. The two opponents stare intently at each other, demonstrating that neither is willing to retreat even a single millimeter. Unexpectedly, the leader of the evaluators begins to dissipate his own magic, undoing his combat stance in the hall. The other Imperial guards looked at their commander, completely bewildered by this sudden change in attitude. One of the subordinates asks, confused, if the leader really intends to ignore the law and let that threat go unpunished. The group's commander remains silent for a brief moment, seriously reflecting on the rules he must follow. He questions whether a magical seed created with so much love and family dedication could truly become an evil for the Empire. The man decides to back away completely, and the storm of shimmering petals that envelop the noble lady dissipates at once. He calmly walks towards the servant holding the small baby, stating that he wishes to witness the boy's fate. The evaluator stares closely at the child, trying to read any sign of hostile intent in their deep, golden eyes. He addresses the woman as Lady Celestia, acknowledging her noble lineage as the respected daughter of a duke, and acknowledges that she was genuinely willing to start an armed rebellion against the Empire to protect the baby. To everyone's surprise, the commander calmly declares that he has decided to ally himself with the noblewoman and keep the secret of that force. The noble mother sighs with great relief upon realizing that the danger of her beloved son being murdered has finally passed. However, the man warns that if the child ever strays from the right path, both of them will pay a very high price for her mistake. He bids farewell and begins to leave the main hall, closely followed by his hooded guards in silence. Before passing through the door, the man casts one last stern look, reminding the noblewoman never to forget their agreement. The immense double wooden doors of the mansion slam shut, marking the end of that tense imperial visit. Celestia remained motionless for a few seconds in the middle of the hall, trying to process everything that had just happened there. She closes her eyes, exhausted, feeling her legs tremble with fear after having faced the most feared men in the Empire. Weakened, the noble lady loses her balance and nearly falls to the ground as she desperately tries to run to her son. She throws herself towards the servant, screaming the name of her beloved baby with a mixture of profound despair and immense relief. The mother holds little Lucius's face, crying profusely and thanking heaven that he is alive and safe. The boy stared at her, completely paralyzed, for he had never received such sincere and protective love in his past life. The noble lady falls to her knees on the floor, embracing her son with all her love and repeating that she is very happy that he is well. Tears of genuine relief streamed down the mother's face, showing that her love for the boy was truly boundless. She cradles the boy to her chest, weeping softly as she repeatedly gives thanks for the life of her beloved heir. Nestled in her comforting arms, Lucius lets himself be carried away by that affection, realizing that he now has a real mother. Outside the mansion, one of the subordinates asks the leader if it was right to let the emergence of such an immense force pass unnoticed. With a discreet smile, the commander orders the emperor to be informed that they have found a talent that will bring glory to the nation. 12 years pass, and we see the young Lucius, now grown up, training in the center of a gigantic magic room in the grand mansion. Multiple beams of purple magic are fired towards the boy, who remains calm and focused in the center of the platform. He dodges each of the attacks with extreme agility, demonstrating an absurd control of his spiritual energy. The boy thinks he needs even more power and continues to push his body to its limits without showing any sign of fatigue. He knows he needs to push his mind to the extreme to perfectly master that amount of magic. Lucius believes that the closer he gets to the brink of death, the purer and more refined his immense strength will become. Balancing on a platform suspended by chains, he performs complex maneuvers with extreme physical dexterity. Every second of intense training serves to refine your inner power, preparing you for your grand future plan. As the boy finishes the exercise, he takes a deep breath while the wooden structure gently sways in the center of the room. Exhausted and quite sweaty, the hare sits on the platform, trying to catch his breath after the extreme physical exertion. Suddenly, a sweet voice calls him from downstairs, revealing the presence of his loving mother and faithful housekeeper, Fran. Celestia gently reprimands him, saying that he's overdoing it again with that dangerous type of training. The young man immediately rises to greet his mother with the respect and elegance befitting an heir to her position. Smiling, the boy reassures Celestia, saying that he is feeling perfectly fine and that there is no reason to panic. The young man jumps lightly from the platform, remembering that he has been doing the same exercise routine every day. The mother and the housekeeper, Fran, watch the boy's training session end with expressions that mix worry and relief. Gliding smoothly on a current of blue wind, young Lucius slowly descends towards the floor of the great hall. He touches the ground with extreme lightness and elegance right in front of the two women who watch him with attention and affection. With a confident smile, the boy reassures his mother that he is perfectly fine and that there is no reason to be alarmed. However, the energetic housekeeper Fran starts yelling at him furiously, saying that danger arises when we let our guard down. The young man simply agrees with the scolding, maintaining an awkward smile, while the maid continues to vent her indignation. He reflects on the 12 long years that have passed since his painful death and reincarnation in that world of magic. The red-haired maid calms down and assumes an extremely serious posture as she approaches the young master to speak with him. She extends her hands, offering the boy an important sealed envelope, while his mother watches the scene attentively. Lucius holds the mysterious envelope with the green wax seal, knowing that this paper will change his life from that moment on. Upon opening the letter, the boy carefully reads its contents, his gaze focused and absorbed in his deepest thoughts. A mysterious smile appears on the young man's lips as he realizes that the moment he has been waiting for has finally arrived. The document contains the official invitation to the prestigious selection ceremony of the Royal Academy, where the greatest prodigies gather. The young man knows that the top graduate of that prestigious institution receives an absurdly powerful divine blessing. Even the cruel Lord Atlas graduated from the top of that academy, obtaining a godlike strength that transcends human limits. He remembers the immense power of the villain who, in the past, unleashed brutal attacks that easily destroyed his opponents. The fearsome Atlas possessed terrifying magical abilities that were far beyond the comprehension of mortals. Zeno bitterly recalls the wounds inflicted by the cruelty of the man he once considered his savior. Clutching the paper tightly, the boy decides he will obtain that sacred blessing to finally defeat the villain. For that to happen, he first needs to stand out as the best student in that prestigious magic academy. The scene shifts to the grand structure of the Royal Academy, where a huge arena packed with spectators awaits the examination. In the stateroom, the young man's beautiful mother watches everything patiently, closely accompanied by her faithful red-haired governess. Wearing the official white uniform, young Lucius walks towards the center of the arena alongside the other candidates. In the stands, the distinguished spectators whisper amongst themselves, showing great anticipation for the start of the fights. With his eyes gleaming a striking golden hue, the young man observes his surroundings with great seriousness and utter determination. Suddenly, a magical and imposing echoes throughout the gigantic arena, demanding absolute silence for the start of the test. The high priest steps before the crowd to announce that the Academy selection ceremony will finally begin. Magical fireworks explode in the sky, grandly kicking off the most anticipated event in the entire empire. The official announcement spreads throughout the arena, informing everyone that the long-awaited entrance exam for new mages is about to begin. Lucius adopts a focused posture, maintaining total concentration on the arena as he mentally prepares for the trials. The instructor begins to detail the rules, explaining that this year's tasks will involve self-defense and threat suppression. A huge, magical beast, once imprisoned, appears before everyone, and the instructor explains that it will serve as the ultimate challenge of the test. The candidates will need to protect floating sacred eggs while facing the ferocious attacks that terrifying creature. In addition to defending the eggs, the young prodigies must defeat the terrifying crystal beast that will relentlessly attack them. The man explains that the evaluation of each participant's performance will be done using powerful floating magical artifacts. A gigantic golden scale appears floating in the sky, officially known as the legendary Scales of Judgment. The artifact will measure both the defensive power needed to protect the eggs and the offensive power required to contain the beast. Magical weights will be added to the scale according to performance, and the final result will determine the candidate's approval. Concluding the explanations, the instructor instructs all participants to proceed immediately to the exam waiting room. Walking through the luxurious corridors of the waiting area, young Lucius notices the other nobles whispering as they watch him pass by. They maliciously comment that he is the cursed child who is only alive thanks to the mercy of the imperial evaluators. Another nobleman whispers arrogantly, stating that if it weren't for that, the boy would have been dead long ago. Completely ignoring the idiotic and envious comments around him, the boy continues his walk with his head held high. The loudspeaker announces the first challenger, named Lilia, who fearlessly advances towards the beast with a great aura of fire. The red-haired girl stares at the immense creature and furiously orders it to be reduced to ashes with her magical flame attack. She unleashes a devastating torrent of blazing fire against the crystal beast, creating a massive explosion in the arena. The immense firestorm consumes the target, and the evaluation panel shows that she obtained excellent marks on her test. The scales of judgment shift, adding the necessary weights and officially approving the young warrior in the first phase. Despite passing, Lilia clicks her tongue, dissatisfied with her own performance, while the creature is restrained again. The instructor announces the next candidate, and a mysterious hooded young man steps forward, ready to fight in the arena. The scales of judgment begin to shine brightly, revealing the result of the previous test. The panel reveals that the mystery candidates successfully passed the first stage of the test. The instructor calls the next competitor, and a young man focused on controlling gusts of green wind steps forward. Then another skilled girl is summoned and fiercely attacks the great beast with her spear of light. A young mage also demonstrates her talent by channeling purple flames and securing her immediate approval. Then the announcer calls for Hector Gilbert, which gets the whole audience quite excited about the fight. Spectators comment that the white-haired boy is the greatest prodigy among the imperial swordsmen. Lucius observes his rival thoughtfully, having never heard of that noble family in his past life. Hector Gilbert faces the feared blue beast, claiming he doesn't need the tedious tricks of wizards. He stands arrogantly, preparing to use his family's legendary sword technique. The swordsman gripped the hilt of his weapon tightly, causing a red, electric aura to emanate from his hands. With his red eyes gleaming with fury, he warns that his sword only cuts down targets silently. Hector performs a perfect circular slash, generating a powerful arc of energy that strikes the dragon. The blow is so brutal that it cuts the monster and the scenery in half with a trail of devastating energy. He calmly sheathes his weapon while the dragon and one of the eggs that were supposed to be protected are separated. The weights fall heavily on the scales of judgment, which begin to move as he calculates his score. The body of the immense crystal monster collapses lifelessly to the arena floor, raising a cloud of dust. The scoreboard shows incredible notes, temporarily placing the skillful young man in red in first place. The audience is shocked, and the other students comment in horror that they didn't even see the attack. The announcer calls upon the last participant in the entrance exam, who is none other than Lucius Elminster. The nobles begin to whisper contemptuously, calling the blonde boy a cursed and disgusting child. They scoff, saying his show will be a bad joke after Hector's brilliant performance. Hector watches his opponent enter with a smug and arrogant smile from his privileged seat. As soon as Lucius steps onto the field, the new crystal dragon begins to charge an immense sphere of purple power. Celestia watches everything with concern while the red-haired girl and the hooded figure observe mockingly. The monster unleashes a colossal blast of area of effect magic directly at the boy, who remains motionless. One of the judges complains to the academy director, questioning how a newcomer could handle such power. The director replies that the standard procedure would be to use a magical barrier to protect the eggs from that brutal attack. However, little Lucius displays an extremely calm and cool gaze, showing no sign of fear. Suddenly, the dragon's immense blast is completely dispersed in the air, leaving the monster confused. The director and the other elders' eyes widened in shock as they witnessed that inexplicable feat. Lucius begins to float gracefully, deflecting and absorbing the magic particles in a spectacular way. He performs acrobatic movements in the air, neutralizing attacks without even needing to use defensive spells. The spectators above watch the scene, unable to believe the tremendous ease with which he demonstrates it. The director is impressed to see that the boy manipulates pure energy with precision without uttering any incantations. His skill is so perfect it looks like he's dodging every single raindrop in a downpour. The young hare focuses his sharp gaze as he prepares to unleash his own lethal counterattack. He points his index finger, channeling all the energy of the place into a small, shimmering blue sphere. The dragon tries to fight back, but its purple magic begins to falter under the terrible spiritual pressure. Lucius dives headfirst towards his opponent, his outstretched hand carrying an immense blue glow. He tells it to stop and fires a thin beam of light that surgically pierces the monster's core. Without spilling blood, the monster is completely neutralized and falls to the ground while the eggs float safely. Lucius calmly lands beside the defeated creature, demonstrating near-perfect control of his power. Suddenly, a gigantic golden weight falls onto the scales of judgment, causing a tremendous crash. The audience of nobles watches the spectacle in complete silence, utterly speechless and paralyzed with shock. Countless other golden weights begin to fall and pile up alarmingly on the scales of the exam. The golden plate of the scale sinks completely under the incredible amount of perfect scores accumulated. The pressure is so immense that the sacred artifact shatters, scattering the gold weights in all directions. The nobles scream in utter panic, unable to believe that the boy they humiliated had failed the test. The red-haired girl grinds her teeth in pure rage at the sight of the hare's overwhelming success. Lucius remains standing in the center of the arena, under the watchful gaze of the audience, as he awaits the outcome. The magic scoreboard reacts with the golden pieces and displays the maximum score in bright green letters in the sky. The sacred artifact confirms that he achieved top marks in both defending against and suppressing the beast. The boy is officially declared the best student of the year, leaving everyone completely surprised. The other students and spectators in the stands begin to celebrate and applaud the result. Housekeeper Fran cries tears of joy, while the young man's mother is deeply moved by the victory. Upon witnessing the scene, Hector Gilbert gripped the arm of his chair with immense force, consumed by a blind rage. The proud warrior bites his own lip until it bleeds from envy at Lucius's immense success. Lucius maintains a completely calm and serene expression, unconcerned by the anger of his rivals. The Master of Ceremonies announces that the awarding of the Medal of Honor to the first-place winner will begin now. The young hare joins the other students in the arena, awaiting the moment to receive his reward. The high priest observes the blonde-haired boy with a rather stern and focused gaze. The legendary green crystal medal begins to float, emanating a powerful and brilliant magical energy. The boy gazes intently at the valuable artifact, sensing the immense spiritual power it carries. The young man receives the official decoration while the green aura of the award envelopes his entire body. He closes his eyes, feeling the power and knowing that he has taken the first step towards his long-awaited revenge. The director solemnly concludes the ceremony, announcing that everyone's academic life will begin the following day. The following day, the students arrive at the imposing castle that serves as the main headquarters of the great academy. New students are instructed to check their classrooms and go directly to their dorm rooms. Before leaving, the housekeeper Fran dramatically clears her throat to deliver one last message to the young man. Crying, she says it's a shame she can't see the young master fight, but assures everyone that they will be waiting. The maid delivers the message from the other servants, and Lucius thanks her, promising to do his best at school. Celestia holds her son's face very tenderly, asking if he really needs to leave now. She rests her forehead against his, knowing he won't rest, and silently prays for his safety. The mother reminds the boy that there are many people in the mansion who care about him and pray for him. The blonde man displays a genuine and sweet smile, comforting Celestia and saying that he knows very well about that. He bids farewell and asks the housekeeper, Fran, to take very good care of his dear mother during his absence. Lucius walks confidently, knowing that starting at the top of the class will make his plans to be the best student easier. Meanwhile, some students shout in indignation upon seeing the absurd differences between the dormitories. The building intended for regular students looks more like a grim prison than a real residence. The redhead girl angrily complains about having to share a cramped room while the top student has a palace. Her roommate is calmly playing chess and asking the irritated redhead not to end up setting the room on fire. She knocks one of the pieces over and reminds them that the best part of the gym is that they can take the top spot anytime. The piece falls onto the board as the scene cuts to the first theoretical lesson for the newcomers in a large room. The students whisper maliciously, saying that Lucius must have cheated to get the highest grade. One of the girls tries to defend the boy, saying that maybe he's just a truly amazing person. Another nobleman tells her to shut up, arrogantly insisting that it was all just a cheap trick. Oblivious to the comments, the blonde man remains silent, ignoring Hector's latent fury right behind him. Outside the classroom, a mysterious figure wearing a black cloak watches the students through the window. The hooded professor emerges from the rooftop carrying an old book and surveying the entire area. Suddenly, the redhead is startled to hear the footsteps of the new instructor, who has just entered the room. Hector Gilbert still grumbles irritably, thinking that if this were a real battle, things would be different. The teacher appears behind him, coldly demanding that the boy extinguish that useless fighting spirit. The swordsman turned around in surprise, sensing the chilling presence and dark, magical aura emanating from the man. Irritated, Hector says he doesn't know him and has no obligation to listen to his orders. The white-haired boy scoffs at the situation, saying he won't be intimidated by silly tricks. The other nobles chuckled quietly, commenting that the imperial instructor possessed no dignity whatsoever. Beneath the dark hood, the mysterious professor listens to the insults of the spoiled youths without showing any reaction. The man raises his sharp fingers like a line of energy and coldly warns that he will repeat the warning one last time. The mysterious Professor Valerius snaps his fingers, releasing an immense amount of dark magical energy. Suddenly, a devastating spiritual pressure falls upon the entire classroom, crushing the new students. Hector Gilbert screams in agony, feeling the absurd weight of gravity preventing him from moving at his desk. The other young people begin to sweat with terror, realizing that the man is actually a true monster. Lucius, however, remains completely calm and still, unaffected by that immense oppression. The professor suddenly breaks the spell and warns the swordsman that he would do well to remember this. He turns his back and coldly warns that things will be very different in the school life that begins today. The man walks slowly around the room, stating that his bloodline and the names of his noble families. The upper-class students lower their heads, terrified by the intimidating presence of that professor. The instructor slams the book on the table, shouting that titles of nobility have absolutely no meaning. He pulls the hood from his head, revealing his stern face as he stares at the students with disdain and coldness. The man stands before the class and declares earnestly that in that place, strength is all that matters. With a penetrating and frightening gaze, the master commands absolute respect from the terrified young people. Lucius observes the man with curiosity, realizing that he possesses an admirable amount of hidden energy. The professor announces that the games are over and decides to officially begin the first practical lesson for everyone. He formally introduces himself as Valerius, assuming absolute control of that prestigious class. He reveals that he is the instructor responsible for teaching the fundamental theory of magic to the new students. The blonde-haired boy focuses his attention on the master, trying to remember where he knew him from before. Suddenly, Lucius remembers that the man was the evaluator who visited him when he was just a baby. The young man is surprised to see that the former envoy of the empire now serves as a tenured professor at the academy. Valerius takes the floor again, promising to teach everyone each of the cruel rules of that school. He projects a bright blue hologram and explains that the ultimate goal for everyone is to graduate at the top. The students are amazed to see a panel with all their names floating in the middle of the hall. The master explains that the ranking will constantly change, and Lucius notices that his name appears in 50th position. Hector Gilbert is right behind him in the rankings, which greatly bothers the swordsman. A young Lilia screams in anger upon seeing that she has been ranked lower and questions who is above her. The professor explains that only the 16 best students in the ranking will be able to compete in the major tournament. The winner of this prestigious dueling championship will receive the most coveted reward in the entire empire. The grand champion will secure the title of best student and will be entitled to receive a special divine blessing. Hearing about the divine blessing causes young Lucius to clench his fist with great determination and fury. The room panics as they realize they will have to fight relentlessly for the title for 4 long years. One of the boys is startled to see his personal panel begin flashing, indicating a very poor rating. His score plummets even further in real time, due to his desperate and cowardly behavior. Valerius warns sternly that idiotic complaints will lower students' grades, and tells everyone to watch their words. He warns that the most important rule is that annually the 125 worst students in the school, they will be summarily and permanently expelled from the prestigious institution without any chance of return. Hector understands that this cruel method serves to balance the number of graduates and eliminate the weak ones. The relentless instructor asks if everyone has finally grasped the extreme seriousness of that school. Without wasting any time, the man begins to channel his magical energy, announcing the start of his first lesson. A huge and terrifying teleportation portal opens in the middle of the room, enveloping everyone in dark energy. The students begin screaming in terror as they are sucked into the dimensional rift, unable to resist. Hector Gilbert curses the professor, calling him a monster, while Lucius silently awaits the end of the journey. The group is depicted in an open field in front of a long green stone bridge suspended over the abyss. The blonde man recovers quickly from the ordeal, while an irritated Lilia appears right behind him on the hill. All the students observe the mysterious floating structure that seems to extend for an infinite distance. Valerius stands before the class and declares seriously that their first lesson will begin now. With a focused expression, the master assures the newcomers that the objective of the challenge is extremely simple. He steps onto the green bridge and announces that all participants must cross the structure within 1 month. Upon hearing the simple explanation, some nobles begin to laugh, thinking that the task will be extremely easy. 2 silly students run ahead shouting that an ordinary bridge is nothing, and try to lead the way for everyone. Lilia and the other nobles watch Hector coldly, ask everyone to wait before taking the next step. Completely ignoring the warning, the 2 idiotic students confidently run towards the stone bridge. However, as soon as the first student steps onto the green ground, the ground begins to crack in a rather strange way. A massive wave of green energy explodes around the boy, instantly draining his strength. The young man falls to his knees, completely weak and dizzy, while trying to warn his colleague not to continue. Hector Gilbert smiles disdainfully, warning that everyone should stop if they don't want to suffer the same fate. Unable to stay on his feet, the unfortunate student plummets from the bridge, falling straight into the darkness of the abyss. Lilia and her colleagues watch the fall in horror, wondering what lies at the bottom of that precipice. Lucius observes the scene from afar in silence, beginning to decipher the mystery behind that cruel test. He realizes that the floating structure drains the spiritual energy of anyone who touches its stones. Valerius emphasizes that strength is the foundation of everything, and it demands that they acquire the necessary energy within a month. Frightened, one of the students calls for the teacher and tries to get some information about the danger of the challenge. The boy asks what the success rate has been for students who have tried to take that test before. The teacher calmly replies that the average pass rate in previous years is around 20%. However, the man turns around with an extremely sadistic smile and says that he ended up expressing himself incorrectly. He corrects his statement, affirming that that percentage does not represent the number of students who pass. The man coldly reveals that in reality, only 20% of students manage to survive this test. Despair grips everyone as they begin to discuss ways to increase their magical power for the challenge. One of the boys questions whether it's even possible to increase that much strength in just 30 days. With his sharp gaze, Lucius reflects that the true secret of that test is not what others think. Analyzing the rate at which energy was drained from the first boy, he does some quick calculations. The blonde man deduces that even with a colossal amount of magic, it would be impossible to cross the bridge simply by running. A smile spreads across his lips as he realizes that the order to accumulate more energy is merely a distraction from the master. The confident young hare realizes he already knows exactly what to do to overcome that lesson with ease. Meanwhile, the warning about the 20% survival rate continues to echo in the students' minds. The nobles begin to sweat with terror, believing that the professor is merely playing a trick on them. They stare into the dark abyss, realizing that their colleague, who just fell, has likely lost his life. Desperate, one of the girls screams, saying she doesn't want to die. During a simple school assignment at the academy, another student warns that he will beg his family to cancel his enrollment and take him out of there immediately. Valeria says that this is a wise decision because anyone who gives up there would only be fit to die on the battlefield. The teacher coldly faces the class, reminding them that spiritual weakness is the quickest path to the grave. He floats away amidst purple currents and announces that the 30-day training period has begun. A large scale with a golden timer appears in the air, starting the countdown for all students. The instructor orders the start of training, causing most of the young people to run desperately for their lives. Lucius focuses his gaze intently, maintaining absolute calm, while the others begin to run in panic. 20 days pass quickly, and we see the students pushing themselves to the limit in intense physical training. Running in the constant rain, the young people challenge their limits to try and increase their endurance. Lilia screams in utter exhaustion as she runs through the forest, pushing her own body to its physical limits. Her colleagues yell at her to be careful because excessive fatigue could lead to a fatal accident. Gasping for breath, the red-haired girl knows that if her spiritual power isn't enough, she will be banished. Other students carry heavy loads of stone on their backs, trying to strengthen their muscles in the mud. One of the boys shouts in surprise upon seeing the absurd display of force happening beside him. Lilia lifts a rock 10 times her own size, displaying a simply insane determination. With her eyes gleaming and veins bulging, she smiles manically as she supports the colossal weight. The scene shifts to Hector Gilbert, who touches the muddy ground and decides to conduct his own experiment there. He observes the stone bridge intently, trying to find a logical way to overcome the challenge. With a serious and focused gaze, the swordsman concentrates his attention on the details of the green stone structure. The young man throws a small, ordinary stone towards the bridge to test the reaction of the magical ground. He realizes that the bridge's surface takes a few seconds to react to contact with any external object. As soon as the contact time limit is exceeded, a powerful explosion of purple energy consumes the thrown stone. Given this, Hector observes the field with an extremely cold and focused gaze as he prepares to act. He unsheathes his sword, causing a terrifying dark red aura to emanate from his entire body. The boy launches himself forward at incredibly high speed, cutting through the air and creating a trail of energy on the ground. With a single devastating blow, he strikes the bridge's structure, causing a massive explosion all around. Hector puts away his weapon and stares at the loud noise with a serious look, focused on gauging the reaction of the surroundings. Time passes quickly, and there are only 3 days left until the deadline, while Lucius continues meditating. The young blonde man reflects that he has already discovered the solution to the test and understands that the secret is not the amount of energy. Clasping his hands, Lucius recalls that the real key to victory is precise manipulation technique. He recalls his past life when he had to fight using only a major amount of strength. At that time, the boy mastered the control of his energy at a cellular level to overcome his limitations. The training demanded absurd precision, comparable to threading a thin line through the eye of a needle. Through this repetitive and exhausting exercise, he managed to perfect his legendary ability called Phantom Shadow, capable of cutting down multiple targets at once. However, the price paid for this extreme dominance was vomiting blood due to the physical strain. He was on the brink of death countless times, kneeling and weak, striving to achieve absolute perfection. With all this control inherited from the past, applying the same logic to modern magic is very simple. While he is meditating, 2 students pass by mocking him and saying that the blonde man gave up and used money to get in. Hidden in the shadows of the trees, a hooded figure watches the boy, calling him a cursed child. The mysterious observer stares at Lucius from a distance, while the young man remains motionless atop the rock. With only 2 hours left until the deadline, the other students run desperately towards the bridge. In the final hour, Hector continues to train his sword attacks relentlessly to ensure victory. The arrogant swordsman smiles confidently, believing his effort will be more than enough. Finally, all the students gather at the entrance to the bridge under a dark and rather cloudy sky. Lilia watches Lucius sitting in the back and becomes extremely irritated by his passive attitude. The redhead is indignant to see that the best student in the class spent the entire month doing absolutely nothing. The timer reaches its final 3 seconds, and Lucius calmly opens his yellowish eyes. At the very last second of the deadline, the boy flashes a slight smile, showing that he is completely ready. Time is running out, and Professor Valerius appears, descending from the heavens enveloped in a dark aura. The ruthless instructor lands before the group, announcing that the challenge's deadline has finally arrived. He stands on the other side of the bridge, facing the students gathered at the entrance, ready to evaluate them all. With a menacing smile, the master demands to see the results of the training and asks who will take the first step. The students stared at each other apprehensively and hesitantly, unsure who should risk crossing the bridge first. Lucius remains silent with his head down while one of the boys asks, frightened, who will step forward. The average students start arguing and passing the buck to each other out of sheer fear. Suddenly, 2 pairs of boots move forward firmly at the same time, ready to face the great challenge. Hector and Lilia step forward together, shouting at the same time that they will be the first to cross. The swordsman claims he was faster, but the red-haired girl complains angrily, asking if he's deaf. Hector tries to go ahead, but Lilia angrily demands to settle the order with rock, paper, scissors. Lucius watches the childish fight between the 2 rivals, displaying a rather amused and mocking expression. Lilia wins the contest and celebrates euphorically while Hector laments in surprise at having lost the hand game. Seeing the 2 distracted, some ordinary students think about all the effort they made to get there. Without warning, 2 students run ahead, running over Lilia, who screams in shock at their actions. The redhead rages furiously, realizing that winning the game of rock, paper, scissors was pointless. The boys step onto the bridge, but immediately a terrifying dark energy begins to envelop their feet. They scream in terror as they are struck by the magical drainage that hurls and paralyzes them onto the rocks. Hector observes the doe's failure and calls them idiots for acting so rashly and without thinking. Without the strength to resist the oppressive spell, the unfortunate students lose their balance and fall into the abyss. One of the students on the ground laments, saying that his energy should have been enough before he gave up. Watching their suffering from afar, Valerius silently thinks that this attempt is completely futile. The master concludes that the true answer to passing the exam was never the amount of magical energy. He understands that to cross the bridge, one needs to refine the body's energy faster than the ground can drain it. Mastering this foundation of constant spiritual refinement is the true secret objective for passing the exam. On the other side of the bridge, Professor Valerius shouts to the class, asking why no one has managed to cross yet. One of the students responds desperately, reminding them that anyone who loses their strength will fall into the abyss and die. Annoyed by everyone's hesitation, the energetic Lilia pushes the timid boy aside and takes the lead. The red-haired girl stands at the entrance to the bridge under a strong wind and a rather gloomy sky. She closes her eyes for a brief second, taking a deep breath to focus all her inner power on the fight. Opening her yellowish eyes, the young woman displays a look full of fury and determination to face the challenge. Lilia ignites her own body in brilliant flames and advances while dark energy tries to hold her feet. Enveloped in a veritable whirlwind of fire, the girl's power explodes, allowing her to run at full strength. Valerius watches the young woman run and recognizes that she possesses an impressive amount of spiritual strength. However, the constant drainage from the bridge begins to consume the girl's flames and slow her down. The purple curse envelopes Lilia's legs, making her movements increasingly heavy. The master analyzes the situation, noting that the curse is designed to drain all the target's energy. Even feeling the weight of exhaustion, the girl stomps on the ground with extreme violence, releasing more fire from her body. The young woman's willpower causes the professor to view the scene with slight surprise and considerable interest. Breathless and sweating from exhaustion, Lilia shouts that she won't be defeated by a simple bridge and pushes her limits. Channeling an absurd amount of flames, the young woman launches herself forward in a desperate run. She stomps on the ground at the finish line, causing a powerful explosion of fire as she crosses the finish line of the test. Valerius realizes that the girl used sheer determination to generate more energy than the bridge could absorb. After overtaking the instructor, the young warrior collapses exhausted onto the dirt floor as the flames die down. She falls face first to the ground, too weak to stay on her feet, as she tries to catch her breath after the exertion. Lying on her back on the floor, the girl breathes with difficulty under the completely cold gaze of her teacher. Even though exhausted, Lilia displays a provocative smile and asks the master what he thought of that. Valerius bluntly declares that she is approved, and the girl celebrates, vibrating with joy right there on the floor. On the other side, Hector watches the scene with disdain while the other students remain paralyzed on the bridge. The swordsman comments that brutal method is inefficient and will only serve to hinder the girl in the future. Carefully analyzing the stone structure, the young man with white hair arrives at his own technical conclusion. He remembers the test with the stone and recalls that the magical soil takes a brief moment to begin to absorb it. There is a small time interval between the first touch on the ground and the moment when the energy is drained. Holding the hilt of his sword, Hector decides that all he has to do is not give the bridge enough time to react to the touch. By concentrating a red aura around his body, the warrior positions himself to make a swift dash. He shoots through the air like a beam of red light, surprising everyone with his unbelievable speed. With subtle taps on the ground, the boy crosses the structure, declaring that his blade will not be touched by curses. Upon reaching the end, he leaps and delivers a circular sword slash directly to the professor's head. With his hair blowing in the wind and his red eyes gleaming, the swordsman displays all his arrogance in combat. Valerius easily dodges the attack and thinks that crossing without giving the attacker time to absorb it is a great strategy. The master warns that attempting to kill the instructor is unacceptable, but the boy demands to know the official result. The professor confirms Hector's approval, and he smiles contentedly, as if the result were obvious. At the entrance to the bridge, the ordinary students are shocked, admitting that the boy's speed was too fast. Lilia watches her rival arrive, maintaining a serious expression, while Valerius awaits the next steps. Suddenly, the class notices the top student on the entrance exam is finally getting ready to walk. With his yellowish eyes focused, young Lucius takes his first step, met with suspicious glances from everyone. The students comment that he doesn't seem to have much magical energy and doesn't know how to strengthen himself like Hector. On the other side, Valerius watches the boy approach, curious to see what method the hare will use. Lucius walks enveloped in soft blue sparks, maintaining surgical control over his own strength. The boy walks calmly across the bridge, leaving his classmates paralyzed on the ground in disbelief. The hooded figure observes the scene in silence, realizing that the blonde boy's perfect score wasn't just luck. Effortlessly passing by the fallen, the young hare advances without suffering any kind of soil erosion. Lilia finds his walk boring, but the professor acknowledges that Lucius gave the perfect answer to the test. Lucius touches the firm ground on the other side, finishing his walk with extreme ease. The boy walks past Professor Valerius, who silently thinks he may have expected too much from the blonde boy. Unexpectedly, an ordinary student crosses the bridge behind him, celebrating the results of his training. The boy informs his classmates that the bridge can be crossed normally, leaving the teacher surprised. The other students sprint across the path, celebrating their victory together. Lilia is surprised by their skill, but Hector mocks them, calling them all simpletons. Valerius stares at the surprised crowd, realizing that something much bigger has just happened there. The master looks at Lucius, who holds a small spark of blue light in the palm of his hand. The professor understands the shocking truth about what the young hare did during the crossing. As he walked, Lucius injected a precise amount of magic to avoid triggering the curse. He directly attacked the formula of the ancient spell that sustained the curse of that bridge. Loud explosions echoed through the place, startling the students and the teacher as they turned around. Lilia and Hector are shocked to find that the magical structure of the curse has dissipated. A great explosion of light and blue rays destroys the bridge's spell before everyone's eyes. Lucius remains calm, holding the shattered core of the magic without showing any effort. Valerius is shocked, calling the boy a monster for destroying a 1,000-year-old spell. The master smiles sadistically while the young hare maintains a serene and focused gaze. The smoke clears and the students comment, thinking the bridge simply collapsed because it was too old. Another boy sighs in relief, saying that if they had taken any longer, they would have died. The students celebrate having narrowly escaped, while Hector rests on a rock. One of the boys takes on a sad expression and thinks about the classmates who fell into the abyss before. He laments that those who fell first also did their best to try to cross the bridge. Everyone stares at the precipice where the shattered pieces of rock continue to fall into the mist. Hearing the lamentations, Valerius snaps his sharp fingers, warning everyone not to worry. A purple mist brings back all the students who had fallen into the abyss, floating safely. The class is in complete shock, wondering how their fallen classmates are still alive after the fall. The professor stands before everyone and declares that each of the students present there. He flashes a proud smile and officially confirms that everyone passed the exam. A boy asks, confused, if those who fell off the bridge shouldn't have failed. Valerius explains that the true objective of the test was to evaluate each person's determination. The students help each other to their feet happily, while Lilia watches the scene with great pride. The teacher praises the class, saying that even in the face of death, no one ran away and everyone faced the danger. He claims that this strength of spirit will become a weapon far superior to any talent. The students listen to the inspiring words and feel immense motivation to continue. Hector remains apart, silently listening to his teacher's approving speech. The instructor looks up at the sky and declares that the step they have taken today is of immense value. Lilia places her hands on her hips with a wide smile as the sunlight emerges. The confident look, Valerius officially congratulates the entire class on their passing grade. A celestial light shines upon the group, and the master declares he is very proud of them all. Lilia celebrates and laughs with happiness, accompanied by the euphoric celebration of her colleagues. The hooded figure silently observes Lucius while the other students chat excitedly. The blond man maintains a serious expression, focused on his own goals within the academy. Valerius steps forward, drawing everyone's attention to make an important new announcement. He points out that passing is different from getting a grade and decides to reveal the current class ranking. The professor announces, in a surprise, that the 45th place belongs to Lucius Elminster. Hearing his statement only makes the young blond man maintain his completely indifferent gaze. The other students whisper indignantly, asking how the boy, who had walked calmly, had become so short. The group begins to speculate and bet that first place should go to the swordsman Hector. Lilia crosses her arms arrogantly, believing with conviction that the top spot belongs to her. Without wasting any time, Valerius continues the call, announcing the owner of the 46th position. The master announces Noah Raven in the 44th position, causing the mysterious hooded boy to step back. Hector becomes furious and angry when he realizes that a hooded boy got a higher grade than him. Noah runs into the forest, terrified, while the other students shout in surprise at his escape. Lilia complains furiously, saying it's absurd that someone so unremarkable ranked higher than her. Hidden behind a tree, Noah cowers in terror, fearing the fury of the red-haired girl. Lucius observes the commotion with his arms crossed, maintaining his complete focus on his teacher's instructions. Valerius ends the announcement and orders everyone to accept their respective positions without complaint. The panel places Lilia in 57th place, leaving the young woman deeply dissatisfied. Hector finishes in 47th place and tells his colleagues to be quiet so they don't have to make fun of him. The scoreboard confirms Lucius in 45th place while Noah is right behind in 46th. The group begins to whisper and complain about the drastic changes that have occurred in the overall ranking. The teacher demands everyone's attention to explain how the school routine will work starting tomorrow. He reveals that the students will be divided into fixed teams of 4 members to carry out missions. Each group should work together in both theoretical classes and practical tasks at the academy. The higher the team's power level, the more difficult the missions assigned to the students will be. The master warns that despite the teamwork, the members remain direct rivals in the ranking. The boys whisper worriedly, finding the idea of having to compete against their own partners cruel. Valerius announces that the official training for each group and the first tasks will be released the following day. However, he makes an exception, stating that the top 4 finishers will form the main team. Lilia screams in indignation upon discovering that she will have to work alongside Hector, Lucius, and the hooded boy. The annoyed girl glares at her new companions and demands that no one interfere with her performance. The instructor ends the conversation with a smile and tells everyone to get ready for tomorrow's challenge. With an analytical eye, Lucius accepts the situation and begins to plan how he will use it to his advantage. He reflects that since his team is made up of the strongest members, they will only receive the most dangerous missions. Although he finds it hard work, the blond man understands that facing great and dangers is the best way to become strong. Before leaving, Valerius informs the group of the 4 best that their first task has already been defined. The master smiles mysteriously, hinting that the mission will take place during practical training. Lilia, Hector, Noah, and Lucius stare at each other in silence, aware that they have a great challenge ahead of them. The professor faces the 4 prodigies and demands that they manage to land at least a single hit on him. The next day, Hector scoffs at the objective, thinking that hitting the master with 4 people will be a piece of cake. The master positions himself in the middle of the field and announces that he will show them how a real fight works. He He tells them not to be fooled and begins to unleash a terrifying amount of blue magic. A massive energy storm spreads across the field, leaving the four young people completely shocked. Valerius warns that even being the best students, none of them could defeat him fighting alone. Displaying his sharp claws, the ruthless master orders the four to advance against him all at once. Feeling the overwhelming pressure of that aura, Lilia, Hector, and Noah assume their fighting stances. Lucius observes the display of strength, maintaining a calm and quite confident smile on his face. The master's magical power creates a veritable whirlwind sweeping across the area as the group launches its attack. Hector draws his sword and runs ahead, shouting for no one to stand in the way of his blow. Lucius remembers that this man officially acts as a respected appraiser of the empire. He knows that the professor is one of the country's greatest military assets and almost unbeatable in duels. With a cynical smile on his lips, the blond man prepares himself while Valerius awaits the group's arrival. The four prodigies attack simultaneously, combining swords, flames, and spells in an all-out offensive. Lucius moves forward quickly, thinking this is the perfect opportunity to test his current level. In a stunning scene, the four students surround the master, attempting to land an attack from above. Hector delivers a deadly sword blow to the professor's neck, who merely smiles arrogantly. The blades cut ripples through the air, creating a shimmering trail as the swordsman advances swiftly. To the young warrior's surprise, Valerius blocks the sharp blade, using only the tips of his fingernails. While holding Hector's sword, the master notices Lilia emerging from above like a tornado of fire. The red-haired girl plummets from the sky, concentrating all her flame into a devastating punch. Lilia appears from above with a furious look, unleashing her fiery punch towards the professor. The impact of the flames creates a colossal explosion of fire and wind, scattering debris across the area. To the girl's surprise, Valerius blocks the powerful attack using only one of his open hands. At the same time, Noah positions himself at a distance, invoking a magic circle to support the group. The hooded boy activates the spell on the grassy ground, creating a purple energy barrier beneath his feet. Hiding his face beneath the shadows of his cloak, Noah extends his hands to fire his projectiles. Several beams of purple magic are launched at the master as Lilia tries to regain the upper hand. Valerius dodges all magical spheres with extreme ease, maintaining his impeccable posture. Annoyed by the interference of the spells, Hector deflects Noah's shots and tells him not to interfere. Lilia becomes furious with the swordsman's attitude and quickly approaches him to demand an explanation. The redhead grabs Hector's head forcefully, taking the young white-haired man completely by surprise. She pushes the boy down, yelling that he shouldn't have gotten in the way of her attack. The two begin to argue in the middle of the fight, while Professor Valerius watches the brawl in silence. Noah tries to say something from under his hood, observing the master who remains completely calm before them. The instructor displays an intimidating expression, demonstrating that the training is about to get more serious. From a safe distance, Lucius begins to concentrate a large amount of blue magic in his hands. Pointing his fingers with precision, the blond man prepares to unleash a devastating spell against the target. Lilia and Hector look back in shock, feeling the immense pressure of power emanating from Lucius. A colossal blue energy beam streaks across the sky, falling directly onto the professor's position. Valerius raises his hand to restrain the spear of blue light, sensing the true power of the hair. The collision causes a gigantic bang, pushing Lilia and Hector backward with the force of the wind. Huge rocks fly through the air, creating a dense curtain of dust that covers the entire battlefield. Lucius touches the ground with extreme lightness and elegance without suffering any damage during the explosion. The blond man complains softly as the cloud of dust begins to dissipate in the middle of the lawn. Intact in the smoke, Valerius ironically asks the students to take better care of the facilities. The master emerges from the center of a huge crater, demonstrating that he suffered absolutely no harm. The professor smiles maliciously, while Lucius stares back him with a sharp, provocative look. Without wasting any time, Lilia and Hector advance again, promising to cut down and defeat the instructor there. Lucius observes his teammates' counterattack, remaining calm while analyzing the master's movements. Combining flames and sword cuts, the two try to hit the target, but the master easily dodges. Valerius unleashes a purple shockwave, repelling Lilia and Hector simultaneously with a single gesture. Noticing the professor's speed, Lucius's eyes widened as he realized a crucial detail. In the blink of an eye, the instructor knocks out the group, sending Lilia, Hector, and No flying through the air. The young blonde man focused his gaze on Valerius, understanding the true mechanics of that man's combat. He realizes that the master is not fighting all three at the same time, as everyone imagines. In reality, the teacher deals with each student individually at a speed imperceptible to the eye. Lucius deduces that each transition creates a minimal and random opening in the opponent's back. The boy understands that this small opening is the only weak point where an attack can succeed. He decides that he will predict exactly where this opening will appear by tracking the rhythm of the blows. Lilia stomps her foot on the ground, preparing to launch herself at her opponent once more. Breathless, the redhead shouts not to be underestimated while Hector and Noah try to regroup. Valerius smiled with satisfaction, seeing the students' persistence as they prepared for the next attack. Lilia and Hector advanced together, delivering synchronized blows from opposite sides against the master. While No unleashes more supporting magic, the two front-line fighters close in on the target. Taking advantage of his colleague's distraction, Lucius runs at full speed, enveloped by his blue aura. Valerius moves like a flock of shadows, dodging the millimeter-precise attacks of the two men at the front. The master dodges Hector's attack and Lilia's fiery punch by inches at the same time. Hidden in the branch of a tall tree, Lucius observes the precise movements of the combat from above. Lilia and Hector attempt a final combined attack, unleashing all the remaining strength of their bodies. Valerius blocks the attack and warns that it won't work, without noticing Lucius leaping into his opening. No, Lilia and Hector look on in surprise, noticing a presence approaching at extremely high speed. Lucius materializes in mid-air behind the master, taking the experienced professor by surprise. With a confident smile on his lips, the young blonde man extends his fingers and reaches the exact gap. A burst of bright blue light engulfs the instructor's rear, confirming the successful execution of the strike. An extremely bright blue light begins to concentrate in the middle of the battlefield. Lilia and Hector try to cover their eyes to protect themselves from the intense glare of the attack. The spell hits the target head-on, generating a truly colossal explosion of energy. Lucius observes the dust settling, maintaining a completely calm and unshakable posture. All the smoke dissipates to reveal that Professor Valerius used a protective barrier. Lilia is in total shock to notice that the master's magic barrier didn't even tremble. No laments, realizing that even that devastating spell didn't cause a single scratch. Valerius mockingly praises the group for forcing him to use defensive magic. The professor stares the young hare down amidst a strong wind blowing across the grass. He states without hesitation that he expected a much better performance from all four of them. Valerius warns that if they don't pass the test within 1 hour, the team will be disbanded. Lilia and Hector are furious to discover that they could be demoted to lower classes. The master turns to leave and reminds them that they need to learn how to fight as a team. He warns that it would be wiser to create a decent plan instead of waiting for luck. Lucius listens to the warnings in silence, keeping his gaze focused and quite thoughtful. Lilia starts kicking the grass in anger, questioning if that man is even human. The red-haired girl stewing in her indignation, while No watches her with fear. Unwilling to accept the situation, the redhead turns and begins to walk toward Lucius. She shouts in the blonde boy's face, asking if he has thought of any combat strategy. Lucius turns to the girl, meeting his colleague's gaze with extreme seriousness. Lilia admits that he was the only one to make the master use defense, and agrees to hear the plan. The young woman clenches her fist tightly, showing immense determination to win. She declares furiously that she absolutely refuses to lose during this training. Lucius takes the floor and asks everyone to remember what happened earlier. Lilia listens attentively while Hector and No move closer to hear the explanation. The blonde boy explains that he noticed a slight distortion in the spiritual energy of the professor's barrier. Hector doubts, surprised, asking how he managed to notice that in a split second. Lucius ignores the surprise and begins to detail how the defensive spell works. He explains that the barrier only concentrates energy at the exact spot that takes a direct hit. The boy concludes that attacking several points at the same time will weaken the shield. No and Hector are impressed to notice that the blonde boy instantly unraveled the magic. Lilia sets her fist ablaze with enthusiasm, understanding how they must act together. The redhead smiles mischievously, realizing that the more simultaneous strikes, the better. Lucius looks at the young woman and asks if she can really pull off her part. Hector mocks, saying he will only participate because he doesn't want to be demoted at the academy. No finds his courage and announces he will use his magic to cover for the lack of fighters. The four young people line up on the field, ready to face the master again. Valerius looks back with a cynical smile, eager to see what they will do. Lilia leads the charge in flames, with the rest of the group advancing right behind her. The team launches a barrage of combined strikes against the professor's magic shield. Noah uses his long-range spells to create more impact points on the barrier. Valerius smiles mockingly, thinking a mass attack at that level is useless. Hector concentrates all his red aura in his eyes, preparing for a fatal thrust. The swordsman leaps from above, landing a surgical strike toward the defense. Hector's blade hits the top of the shield, making the energy tremble violently. The boy uses all his strength to press against the spell at the same spot he hit. Lilia appears right above him, wrapped in flames, to reinforce the impact of the attack. The girl's flames and the swordsman's cut unite in an overwhelming pressure. The two combine their strength while Valerius struggles to keep the barrier alive. The joint force of the attacks finally begins to crack the master's defense. Valerius stares at the young ones and acknowledges that it was their best attack yet. Concentrating a strong blue light in his hands, the master warns that unfortunately, it is not enough. Lilia and Hector are completely out of strength, feeling the weight of the exhausting combat in their bodies. The group collapses to their knees before the barrier, while No loses his balance right behind them. Unexpectedly, Lucius appears and holds Hector's sword along with his companions. With his yellowish eyes glowing, the blonde boy announces confidently that the fight is not over yet. He channels his own blue magic directly through the blade, increasing the power of the strike. Lilia and Hector scream, using every last drop of energy to push the final attack. The group's hands unite over the hilt of the sword, creating an incredible magical resonance. The fusion of magic and combat energy completely surprises the two young warriors. A beam of golden light shoots toward the sky, leaving the professor shocked by the power. The master's barrier shatters in an explosion of energy that sweeps across the lawn. The four students dash forward, crossing Valerius's position with extreme speed. They skid across the grass, managing to overcome their instructor's blockade. Showing a small cut on his face, Valerius smiles with satisfaction and declares them all passed. Lilia and Hector celebrate euphorically, realizing they managed to complete the mission. Relieved to have survived, Noah sighs deeply and falls unconscious face first onto the lawn. Completely exhausted by the fight, Lilia and Hector collapse to their knees, while Lucius watches. The redhead tells her colleague to thank her for her firepower, but Hector mocks her, saying he accepts her as his subordinate. Lilia screams, indignant at the boy's insolence, while the professor walks away in silence. Lucius watches his companion's argument while looking fixedly at his own hands. The young hare realizes that something extraordinary happened at the moment of that final attack. He tries to understand the magical sensation he experienced when touching his colleague's sword. The boy remembers how his magic fused with the blade, appearing to be a single weapon. He reflects on the fusion between sorcery and swordsmanship, desiring to master this incredible technique. Lucius displays a dark smile upon realizing the immense hidden potential of that combination. The blonde boy stands out out on the field, wrapped in a brilliant light while the others argue. Valerius turns before them and officially reinforces the entire team's approval. The master explains that the main lesson was to learn the importance of teamwork. The professor begins to dissolve into dark mist, warning them not to forget this lesson. The instructor disappears completely before the 4 students in the middle of the grass. Thoughtfully, Lucius analyzes his hand, recalling the perfect fusion between magic and swordsmanship. The blonde boy smiles mischievously, certain that this technique will be his greatest weapon against the enemy. Later in the Imperial Academy's great library, silence takes over the room. Lucius researches while sitting in a high chair, reading ancient books on magic energy. He analyzes a theoretical book that details the spiritual circuits present in the body. The text explains that spiritual energy flows through specific internal channels. This energy converts into magical power for mages or combat energy for warriors. The book states that an ordinary person is born with only one of these circuits activated. Lucius deduces that the strike combined his magic with the combat energy of Hector's sword. The young man turns the page of the book, seeking to understand if it would be possible to do this alone. The text reveals that extremely rare individuals possess both circuits, fusing sword and magic. Upon reading this impressive information, the blonde boy stands up, excited by the great discovery. Later, he picks up an ordinary sword and tries to perform the energy fusion alone. Wrapped in a bright blue aura, Lucius positions himself on the field to test his theory. Although the initial attempt ends in failure, the boy notices something very promising. He feels a trace of the combat circuit that he mastered in his past life within the blade. The blonde boy realizes that the warrior energy from his previous life might still be dormant. He smiles with ambition, knowing that if he awakens this power, he will achieve the perfect fusion. Meanwhile, a mysterious figure in dark clothes jumps over the trees, watching the students. Instructor Kathy appears using a megaphone and announces a special exercise between teams. She explains that the test will be a grand tournament between classes of different power levels. The veterans from higher classes look at the freshmen with a lot of mockery. The teacher flies through the skies, encouraging everyone to fight to rise in the rankings. Lucius observes the rivals and notices that they hold higher positions at the academy. The veterans laugh at the group of freshmen with an arrogant and provocative look. Lilia is deeply irritated by their looks and screams, demanding respect from the rivals. The redhead assumes an aggressive stance, while Noah hides behind her, afraid of a fight. The girl continues growling with anger, while Hector observes his companion's attitude. Suddenly, a giant student accidentally bumps into the redhead, causing the young woman to stumble. Lilia turns to curse, but the huge boy apologizes, saying he didn't see her. The giant and his friend bow in respect, leaving the girl impressed by his size. Instructor Kathy explains that the goal of the test is to obtain a magic orb in the center of the forest. A great green light shines at the top of the sacred tree, indicating the treasure's position. Lucius focuses his gaze on the magic jewel, trying to understand the item's true utility. Kathy warns that the orb possesses pure energy capable of greatly increasing the power of whoever consumes it. The students are euphoric to know that the item can save years of intense training. Hearing that makes Lucius show a dark and quite ambitious smile on his face. The blonde boy understands that this is the perfect opportunity he needed for his plan. He realizes that this pure energy can awaken his old combat circuit for good. The other teams prepare for combat, releasing their murderous intentions on the field. Lucius's team positions itself with determination, ready to face any adversary. The teacher fires a flare into the sky, giving the official start to the hunt in the forest. The blonde boys group darts off at high speed, entering the dense vegetation of the area while running through the woods. Lucius notices 2 enemies jumping from the branches to ambush them. 2 veterans appear from above, displaying a wicked smile with weapons prepared for the attack. The invaders launch themselves against the team, shouting that they will eliminate the freshmen right there. Hector looks up, annoyed, noticing the sudden approach of the opponents. The pair of veterans falls upon Lucius, confident that they will get a quick knockout. Without even blinking, the blonde boy points his fingers and fires a shocking wave of magic at the pair. Both invaders are thrown to the ground unconscious, leaving their colleagues shocked. Lucius warns the team not to be impressed by the theoretical difference in the general ranking. The young man states with an intimidating look that their group is extremely powerful. Lilia and Hector listen to the blonde boy's words, feeling their confidence increase for the combat. New voices echo through the vegetation, surrounding the team with several armed warriors. A veteran with yellowish hair appears, smiling, warning that the real fight starts now. Hector stares at the opponent with contempt, preparing to respond to the imminent challenge. The veterans launch their attack, promising to hunt the freshmen to take their points. The enemy leader concentrates a powerful green spell in his hands with an insane expression. He fires a colossal blast of green magic directly at the swordsman's position. Hector observes the approach of the strike, maintaining his calm and firmness on his feet. Delivering a perfect cut with his sword, the boy slices the enemy magic in half. The shooter is completely perplexed to see his strongest spell being easily negated. With a murderous look in his eyes, Hector advances rapidly to behead his adversary. On the other side, two brutal warriors jump with axes toward the young redhead. The pair of opponents shouts with anger, trying to crush Lilia with attacks from above. The red-haired girl observes the assault without showing any kind of fear. Setting both her fists ablaze with violent flames, Lilia prepares to counterattack. The young woman leaps high, facing both attackers head on with fury in her eyes. A great explosion of fire occurs when Lilia's burning punch collides with the weapons. Lilia clicks her tongue with fury to see the insolence of the veteran warriors. The opponents are terrified to feel the overwhelming pressure of the redhead's fire. The young woman clenches her flaming fist, preparing a devastating impact strike. Lilia releases an explosion of fire, screaming for the enemies to never underestimate her again. The girl watches the flames burn the area without giving the pair a chance to react. An ice spell appears from above, attempting to freeze the freshman by surprise. No channels his shadow energy, stating with determination that their group is strong. The hooded boy remembers Lucius's words and activates his magic circle. No launches his shadow spears, destroying the ice attack to protect the team. The shadow magic completely shatters the enemy spell into hundreds of pieces. One of the enemy warriors is knocked down violently after his team's defeat. Smiling, Lilia acknowledges No's talent while the boy shyly celebrates the result. Lucius watches the mountain of opponents fall into the ground and asks if the combat is over. Lilia no, and Hector look at the blonde boy, quite impressed with his leadership. Surrounded by dozens of knocked-out enemies, Lucius orders the group to continue advancing. Instructor Kathy observes through the magic sphere that the 5 best teams have been defeated. The teacher is surprised to confirm that a group of freshmen eliminated the veterans. She praises the talent of the support trio, but notes that the true differential is something else. The evaluator focuses her attention on the image of Lucius, sensing something mysterious about the boy. Kathy realizes that the blonde boy motivated the entire team and has the strength to win alone. The teacher smiles intrigued, asking herself who that student really is. Lucius leads the run through the forest alongside his loyal teammates. Hidden in the treetops, an unknown observer monitors their approach. Through binoculars, the figure sights the light of the sacred orb, surrounded by strange shadows. The sunset colors the sky while the remaining teams run toward the great tree. The group approaches the final goal, but notices that other competitors are running right behind them. The immense sacred tree appears before them, emitting a spectacular green glow from its trunk. The magic jewel gleams intensely inside the gigantic wooden structure. Hector and Lilia quicken their pace, excited to reach the treasure first. Suddenly, Lucius senses imminent danger and remains on high alert. The boy extends his arms to block the group and orders everyone to stop immediately. Lilia complains irritably, wanting to advance, but the blonde boy demands that she listen to the ground shaking. The red-haired girl notices the intense vibration that begins to shake the earth. The ground around the sacred tree begins to shudder with extreme violence and noise. Hector looks at the forest, scared, feeling that a colossal threat is approaching. No retreats, worried, upon feeling a gigantic gigantic wave of power rising from the depths. A monstrous explosion of magic ruptures the ground, destroying the area around the tree. A gigantic sea monster emerges from the ground, devouring the vegetation and terrorizing everyone. The competing students fall into a total panic and begin to flee in a stampede from the beast. Lucius remains motionless beside his team, staring at the creature without showing fear. At the command center, the assistant screams in terror, asking for orders from instructor Kathy. The man demands that the exam be cancelled immediately to save the students' lives. Kathy stretches mockingly, appearing not to care at all about the desperation. The teacher denies the request, smiling, and orders that the test continue exactly as it is occurring. She walks calmly, stating that unexpected events happen all the time in real life. The assistant is indignant at the insensitivity, while the woman maintains her cold gaze. The staff trembles with fear upon feeling the scary aura emanating from the teacher. Kathy coldly declares that anyone who dies there would never survive a war. The aide swallows hard, horrified by the ruthless mentality of his superior. Suddenly, the woman begins to laugh, saying she was only kidding with all of them. Kathy boasts, claiming that she resolves any problem if the situation gets out of control. The teacher sighs, looking at the horizon, while the assistants remain apprehensive. She reflects in silence, finding the appearance of a magic beast in that area strange. Observing the scene with a suspicious look, Kathy feels there is something wrong with the beast. On the battlefield, the students deliver continuous attacks against the sea monster. A warrior jumps swiftly with his sword, trying to cut the skin of the gigantic creature. The blade collides with force, but ends up breaking against the target's absurd resistance. The swordsman notices in shock that the beast's scales are strengthened by the magic orb. No and other mages combine powerful spells to try to contain the enemy's advance. An immense magic explosion occurs on the beast's body, spreading smoke throughout the lagoon. The smoke settles to reveal that the combined attack didn't cause any damage to the beast. The creature remains intact, swimming calmly while threatening to devour the students. The students fall into total despair upon seeing that not even a scratch was made. The beast slams its tail violently, provoking immense waves and spreading panic in the group. The monster opens its monstrous mouth, preparing to swallow everyone at once. Seeing the beast's sharp fangs, the students begin to run desperately to escape. While everyone panics, Lucius jumps directly toward the beast's open mouth. The students look to the sky, shocked, thinking the blonde boy has completely lost his mind. The young hare dives without any hesitation into the interior of the monster's throat. Lilia screams desperately for Lucius's name, seeing her companion being swallowed by the creature. The beast closes its mouth and sinks into the water, taking the boy into the depths of the lake. Inside the beast's belly, Lucius maintains a calm smile and lights a devastating spell. The monster dives completely into the water, while tension takes hold of the survivors. Lilia and Hector stare at the lake, devastated, believing they have lost their companion. The beast's tail disappears into the darkness, increasing the silence at the scene even further. A student with glasses complains, saying that inexperienced freshmen always mess up. Suddenly, an intense and mysterious glow begins to emerge from the bottom of the dark waters. One of the boys points, terrified, upon noticing the giant energy rising from the deep. The sea monster is thrown into the sky, propelled by a colossal column of light. The students panic, realizing that the creature's fall will cause a fatal tsunami. At the top of the trajectory, the light from inside the beast intensifies to its maximum limit. The creature explodes in the air, transforming into thousands of shining particles of energy. Lilia, Hector, and No observe the spectacle in the skies, completely paralyzed in shock. The veterans watch the scene, unable to believe what has just happened there. Lucius floats softly in the night sky under the moonlight like a true savior. The students ask, shocked, if the blonde boy destroyed the beast from the inside alone. The boy descends victoriously, holding the green spiritual orb shining in his right hand. With a triumphant look, Lucius confirms in silence that the goal has been reached. The hero steps onto the soil softly before the amazed looks of the entire academy. Lilia and Hector stare at their colleague, shocked by his absurd display of power. power. Displaying an imposing smile, the blonde boy shows off the magic jewel conquered in the test. Instructor Kathy appears flying and officially announces the end of the exercise. Lucius raises the trophy, while the teacher congratulates the winning group for the result. The evaluator orders using the megaphone that all students return to the academy. Kathy observes the blonde boy from afar, displaying a look filled with fascination and curiosity. The veterans are deeply frustrated to see the freshman with the victory, a boy with blue hair stewing in envy for having been surpassed by first-year novices. Lucius's team walks proudly, carrying the coveted green orb with extreme glory. Lilia mocks, saying the test was too easy and demands greater challenges for the future. No laughs quietly under his hood while Hector accompanies the team with a satisfied smile. Lilia stared at her companion, still impressed while trying to understand that boy's true strength. She looked at Lucius and wondered in silence who the blonde boy really was after witnessing that surreal feat. The red-haired girl chewed on her thoughts, while the young hare observed the jewel in his hands. Lucius focused his gaze on the spiritual orb, completely oblivious to his teammates' astonishment. The boy analyzed the artifact, realizing that it contained an enormous amount of pure energy. He noted that the energy concentrated in the sphere was absurdly dense and far superior to the norm. The blonde boy smiled in silence, aware that this item would be enough to awaken his combat circuit. Suddenly, a noise in the vegetation makes the whole group turn in alert to the darkness of the woods. A veteran appears in the middle of the trees, praising the impressive performance of the 4 freshmen. The older student approaches alongside his colleague, stating that they were scared of the beast. He showers the group with praise, saying they didn't even look like first-year students because they were so strong. Lucius observes the pair's approach, maintaining an attentive and quite suspicious look on the men. The veteran continues flattering everyone and states that he has become a true fan of the team's talent. The man extends his hand with a friendly smile, asking that they become friends despite their age difference. Lilia stares at the extended hand, hesitating for a few moments before making a decision. The redhead gives a convinced smile and decides to lower her guard to accept the veteran's greeting. The young woman extends her arm to touch the veteran's hand, sealing the supposed peaceful alliance. However, the man displays a wicked smile at the last millisecond, revealing his cruel intention. In the blink of an eye, the traitor delivers a devastating attack, catching the girl completely defenseless. Lilia widens her eyes without reaction upon being hit head-on by the opponent's cowardly blow. A violent impact wave throws the redhead back, generating an explosion of shock at the scene. Hector and No panic completely upon seeing their companion being attacked from behind that way. The red-haired girl collapses unconscious while the air is knocked out of her lungs. Lucius holds Lilia's unconscious body and questions coldly what the veteran thinks he is doing. The blonde boy declares with a murderous look that the academy exercise ended at that exact moment. The veteran mocks the situation while other students from his class emerge from the shadows. With a maniacal look, the man states that the freshmen are extraordinary and perfect for his plan. He extends his arm, declaring that Lucius's group is the best prey they could ever find. Hector feels the anger rising through his body and assumes his combat stance, emanating a dangerous aura. The veteran smiles with sarcasm and asks if the young ones have ever heard about the stagnant ones of the academy. The group of veterans surrounds the freshmen entirely while the tension in the air reaches the maximum level. No trembles with fear under his hood upon hearing that sinister name being mentioned by the invaders. The man explains that the school's only rule is to expel only the 125 worst students every year. He reveals that because of this rule, whoever is not at the bottom can remain in the institution forever. The veterans became prisoners of their own failure, aging in school without evolving. The traitor reveals with dark pride that these veteran students are called the stagnant ones. Lucius stares at the man coldly and asks what mediocre veterans like them want with his group. The man laments that he lost his youth stuck in intermediate rankings without managing to rise in level. He vents with bitterness, revealing that they even lost the right to use their family names. Hector mocks, pointing his sword and saying they are just old failures without a path. The veteran loses control and screams, desperate, saying he will do anything to recover his honor. He grabs his own face, flipping out with hatred while swearing to recover everything he lost in life. The stagnant ones activate a giant magic hourglass that emits a scary purple aura on the field. Hector observes the shadow artifact and recoils, shocked, not understanding what that macabre energy is. Several skulls and a necromantic energy emerge from the artifact, while Noah lights up his eyes under the hood. The hooded boy activates a shadow magic circle, releasing impressive dark power. Noah's shadow magic expands through the area in a scary display of energy. The fat veteran smiles mischievously, believing their plan will work perfectly. The stagnant ones raise their arms, while the purple power of the hourglass consumes the entire environment around them. Hector observes the extreme situation, sweating cold while No takes on the combat with his shadow magic. The veterans channel a dark purple energy directly through the magic circles in their hands. The black magic accumulates with intensity while the pair prepares their ritual against the freshmen. All this energy feeds the magic hourglass, making the skulls inside the artifact shine. Both stagnant ones enter ecstasy upon feeling the evil power of the artifact strengthen. The fat man displays a sadistic look, promising to drain all the strength from the freshman until death. No tries to resist using his shadow magic and screams for his companions to retreat. The hourglass absorbs the energy around it, while the villain delights in the sensation of power. The hooded boy falls to his knees, exhausted, in the magic circle while Hector analyzes the scene. The giant artifact shines with an overwhelming purple light, threatening to drain everyone in the area. Hector realizes the spell source is the hourglass and decides to destroy it to save the team. The swordsman leaps high into the air and invests with his blade against the mysterious artifact. He delivers a powerful cut focused on splitting the giant hourglass exactly in half. The sword crosses the glass vessel, but the attack simply passes through the item without causing damage. Hector is in shock upon realizing that his physical blow failed totally against the vessel. By surprise, the fat stagnant one appears behind the boy and grabs him by the neck violently. The villain reveals that only whoever activated the artifact can touch it and begins to drain the boy. At that moment, Lucius darts at high speed toward the combat to save his colleague. The young hare focuses his gaze on the battle, calculating the best strategy to win. He understands that the hourglass can absorb any type of magic attack launched, and he realizes that touching the enemies, while the ritual functions, drains the victim's energy. Lucius concludes the logic of the spell and decides to change his way of fighting drastically. The blonde boy leaps swiftly into the air and delivers a devastating flying kick against the aggressor's face. His soul hits the fat veteran's face with an absurdly violent physical impact. The force of the blow throws the villain back, freeing Hector from his claws on the spot. The stagnant one collapses to the ground with the impact, while the swordsman falls free to the ground. Lucius lands with elegance and confirms that purely physical attacks work against them. The dust dissipates, revealing the veteran with the ponytail, impressed by the blow. The boy walks calmly across the grass toward the sword that was lying on the ground. Fallen and without strength, Hector watches his colleague approach with a look of total astonishment. The boy asks what the blonde boy intends to do with a blade, given that he is a mage. Lucius wields the swordsman's hilt and responds coldly that he is not just a mage. The boy raises the weapon, adjusting his stance with truly impressive mastery. He displays a dark smile, revealing that in truth, he always trained as a swordsman. Both stagnant ones look at the boy, surprised to see a mage holding a sword. Lucius assumes a perfect combat stance, while the glow in his eyes increases. He demonstrates a scary aura, ready to use his past life's abilities. A wind arises around the blonde boy, while he positions himself for the final investiture. With a golden and intimidating look, the young man prepares to exterminate the opponents. The veterans begin to laugh, finding it ridiculous for a mage to try to fight using a blade. The fat man mocks, asking if the little boy now wants to play at being a swordsman. The villain advances, promising to break the sword in half, but Lucius passes by him like a bolt of lightning. In the blink of an eye, the blonde boy delivers multiple swift cuts that wound the aggressor. Lucius hits the fat man and continues his fluid movement, advancing against the other rival. The veteran with the ponytail tries to block the desperate attack with his gauntlets. With a cold look, the young hare turns the blade, adjusting the angle for the finishing blow. He switches the weapon's handling with extreme perfection, leaving the adversary terrified. Lucius delivers a cutting thrust of blue light toward the opponent's chest. The energy blade cuts the veteran in half, ending the combat in 1 second. The villain collapses, defeated, while Lilia begins to regain consciousness on the lawn. The redhead looks at Lucius standing with the sword and is totally shocked by what she sees. Lucius looks back in silence, while the dust of the battle begins to settle at the scene. The blonde boy walks with majesty, passing over the unconscious body of his enemy. Hector observes everything from the ground, not believing that Lucius used pure swordsmanship without using mana. The swordsman is perplexed, trying to understand how a boy possesses such ability. The last veteran is terrified to see the boy approaching and begins to retreat in fear. Climbing onto the hourglass, the man screams in terror, asking for Lucius to calm down for good. The subject tries to convince himself that the blonde boy is just a child without combat energy. Recovering his stance, the villain decides to resort to the artifact's power to defend himself. He touches the magic hourglass to absorb all the accumulated stolen energy. The man's body inflates violently, developing colossal and insane musculature. Wrapped in a purple aura, the transformed villain challenges Lucius, showing off his new strength. Lucius advances and strikes the rival's chest, but the blade bounces off the hard skin without cutting. The monster laughs mockingly, stating that an attack without energy will never pierce his body. The villain boasts, saying that invulnerability comes from the energy stolen by them. The giant opponent launches himself against Lucius, while the blonde boy advances to face him head-on. Both exchange ferocious blows in the air, with the villain blocking the sword using his arms. The giant tries to land a devastating punch, but the blonde boy dodges with extreme agility. The physical battle intensifies, with the boy dodging lethal attacks by a hair's breadth. Lucius notices the situation is dangerous because his normal cuts don't cause real damage. He dodges one more heavy blow, realizing the need to increase his power. The sword collides again against the rigid skin of the enemy, generating sparks across the field. The boy realizes that his current body's strength lacks sufficient potency. Lucius delivers a swift sequence of blows that continue bouncing off the rival's skin. He remembers that in his past life, a body like that would be cut like common paper. The enemy manages to intercept the attack, grabbing Lucius's blade with his fist. Annoyed, the giant strikes the boy, throwing the young swordsman far away. The villain advances furiously, shouting that he was already tired of the freshman's attitude. Lucius skids across the soil, falling to his knees while the impact pushes him backward. Lilia and No watch the moment in panic, fearing for their loyal companion's life. The boy firms himself on the ground, keeping his sword ready while the rival approaches. The giant mocks, walking slowly, certain that victory is already guaranteed. He states that without combat energy, the blonde boy's swordsmanship is nothing more than a game. Kneeling on the ground, Lucius notices the spiritual green orb rolling exactly by his side. Upon approaching the jewel, the boy feels his heart pulsate with a different force. He understands that his old combat circuit is reacting to the energy of that sphere. Lucius extends his hand to the green jewel, decided to use that power immediately. The villain jumps with anger, preparing the final blow to crush the boy on the lawn. The blonde boy holds the orb, concentrating to absorb all the pure energy contained in it. He squeezes the green sphere tightly, making the artifact release a colossal light. A storm of green spiritual energy surrounds the boy's body in the middle of the field. The pure magic compresses into a shining core directly in the young hare's chest. All the orb's energy is absorbed quickly by Lucius's body in 1 second. The boy raises his head, feeling the energy flow through his veins and transform his being. He closes his eyes, allowing the spiritual strength to reach the bottom of his soul. An internal explosion of power occurs, reopening the boy's dormant magic channels. Lucius opens his eyes, which begin to glow with an overwhelming and fierce golden tone. He smiles with satisfaction upon feeling that his combat circuit has finally awakened. The silhouette of his old warrior body appears behind him, emanating insane power. The villain paralyzes in pure terror upon feeling the terrifying aura that emanates from the boy. Lucius positions himself while a red combat aura surrounds his legs on the ground. Lucius understands that the absorbed combat energy will last for only a single attack. Feeling the boy's terrifying aura, the villain trembles with fear, unable to react. A colossal pressure of red color rises from the blonde boy's body, scaring everyone. The giant is paralyzed with cold sweat, realizing the boy's murderous intention. With a demonic look, Lucius warns that finishing fights quickly is his specialty. The other stagnant one notices the imminent danger and screams from the top of the artifact to warn his colleague. He screams in desperation, ordering the giant not to let that blow hit him at all costs. The villain tries to retreat, scared, but Lucius darts like a red bolt of lightning in his direction. The blonde boy executes a devastating red cut, crossing the giant's body in mid-air. The villain collapses to the ground, totally defeated, while smoke covers the entire area. Lucius remains standing while the red combat energy begins to dissipate. The boy falls to his knees, exhausted, realizing that the temporary strength from the orb has run out. Sweating from the extreme effort, the young hare analyzes the state of his own body. He celebrates mentally for having managed to unlock his combat circuit. However, he notes that the channel is still incomplete and requires more energy to function alone. A satisfied smile appears on the boy's face upon realizing his immense progress. Lucius holds the sword, certain that now he possesses a clear path to get stronger. Running, worried, No approaches, calling out the name of his young companion. Lilia approaches, still shocked, staring at the boy without managing to understand what she saw. The redhead asks in total shock how the blonde boy managed to execute that insane attack. The knight under the moonlight witnesses the team's silence before the power demonstrated by the blonde boy. No asks if his friend is okay, and Lucius responds calmly that he is safe. Hector observes the scene from a distance and calls the boy by his family name. The swordsman approaches the two with an extremely serious and questioning look. He states that mastery with the sword belongs to someone who has trained for decades. With half-closed eyes, Hector demands to know who taught swordsmanship to the young hare. Under the moonlight, the two stare at each other in the forest in a tense moment between swordsmen. Lucius observes the rival's distrust, maintaining total mystery about his past. The blonde boy only smiles in silence, refusing to reveal the secret of his previous life. Later in the academy's corridor, Lilia celebrates upon seeing that their ranking has risen significantly. No agrees, remembering that everyone in the group managed to receive their spiritual orbs. Occupying the 26th spot, the redhead provokes Noel, saying she won't lose to him anymore. The hooded boy assumes the 29th spot and accepts the provocation with a smile. Occupying the 25th position, Hector walks thoughtfully without saying a single word. The boy clenches his face, frustrated for having stayed behind the blonde boy in the overall result. Lilia continues playing with Noel, while Lucius walks firmly ahead of everyone. Now in the 19th position in the ranking, the boy reflects on the awakening of his circuit. He concludes that his current amount of energy still does not allow him to use the power alone. The blonde boy realizes he needs to find a way to greatly increase his magic reserves. The group arrives at a large hall filled with students gathered before a poster. A giant mural announces the start of the 27th Imperial Betting Tournament. Lilia looks at the announcement, curious, asking what that competition is about. Lucius reads the notice, surprised to discover about the great Imperial betting event. By surprise, instructor Kathy appears, floating upside down beside the blonde boy. The teacher asks mockingly if the young hare became interested in the dispute. She reveals joyfully that she used their action to easily get rid of those veterans. Lucius stares at the teacher coldly and asks if she came just to talk nonsense. Kathy is amused by his reaction and decides to explain the details about the competition. She tells through the megaphone that warriors from all over the empire gather at this grand event. A student comments beside them that the tournament is famous for serving as a bet for nobles. A student comments, worried, remembering the rumors of deaths in the imperial tournament. Floating through the air, Kathy confirms mockingly that most of the rumors are true. The teacher points her finger, smiling, and reveals that the arena possesses a special structure. She explains that the spiritual energy released by the fighters accumulates in the arena. The combatants on the field naturally absorb the magic concentrated during the battles. As the tournament advances, the density of spiritual energy in the location increases a lot. Kathy celebrates, stating that the longer one fights, the bigger the magic reserve gets. Upon hearing this crucial information, Lucius widens his eyes, realizing the great chance. The teacher smiles, saying that the dispute outside campus is great for testing abilities. The other students decide to leave because they find the betting event dangerous and useless. Lucius ignores the colleague's complaint, focused on the opportunity to accumulate energy. The blonde boy smiles mischievously, certain that winning all the fights will give him insane power. The young hare calls the teacher, asking where he should submit his registration. Kathy turns, surprised to realize the boy's determination to enter the tournament. Lilia screams indignant, while Lucius demands to know the location to submit the event form. Joyfully, the teacher warns that she will personally handle the registration of her favorite student. She approaches his year, while the redhead complains about the proximity of the two. Kathy whispers, warning that the strongest students at the academy will also participate. The woman walks away laughing and wishes good luck to the young man in his debut in the arena. Displaying his golden eyes, Lucius smiles confidently, prepared to face anyone. The grand announcer announces with enthusiasm the official opening of the imperial tournament. He explains to the nobles in the stands that one only needs to bet money on their favorite. The presenter highlights that betting at the start of the rounds yields gigantic prizes. He urges the audience to invest heavily in the first combats to get the jackpot. Some nobles mock upon seeing a 12-year-old child representing the academy. Lucius enters the grand arena, observing the luxurious structure of the combat site. The boy notices that the fighters around him overflow with an immense amount of magic. He analyzes the brutal aura of the adult warriors gathered in the concentration area. The blonde boy realizes that the three greatest veterans in the ranking haven't arrived at the location yet. The presenter uses the microphone to announce the first official confrontation of the event. The screen displays the combat between the freshman Lucius and a muscular axe warrior. The announcer highlights the enormous size difference between the child and his opponent. He introduces the adversary Garzas, coming from the respected Northern Escort Corps. From the stands, Lilia comments, shocked about the dangerous fame of that elite troop. Hector agrees seriously while the crowd begins to make their bets en masse. The nobles celebrate, betting high on the certain victory of the experienced warrior. Rains of gold coins cover Garzas' image, guaranteeing his status as a favorite. Other fighters laugh in the stands, feeling sorry for the little boy who will be crushed. The pillars around the arena fill with light to give the signal for the start of the duel. Carrying his giant axe, Garzas displays a sadistic smile, ready to kill. Lucius remains motionless in the center of the arena, maintaining a totally serene stance. The judge raises the hammer, signaling that the combatants are ready for the start. He strikes the hammer, authorizing the start of the fight, while the public goes into delirium. Garzas advances like a wild beast, shouting insults against the blonde boy. In the stands, Lilia is impressed by the incredible speed of the aggressor. The warrior raises his axe to split the freshman in half in a single blow. Without showing fear, Lucius only analyzes the weapon style of his opponent. The boy raises his hand, concentrating a bright blue aura at the tip of his fingers. Garzas widens his eyes in total shock upon feeling the magic pressure arising. Lucius fires a colossal beam of blue energy that throws the giant through the air. The warrior Garzas is thrown through the air, screaming while suffering the direct impact of the spell. Lucius maintains his arm extended, surrounded by lightning and a magic blue aura. With a cold and firm look, the young hare demonstrates total mastery over the situation. The muscular opponent collapses, unconscious on the stage floor, under the dust of the explosion. In the stands, the nobles are completely shocked by the result of the combat. The presenter sweats cold behind his glasses, not believing in the instant knockout. Recovering his breath, the announcer screams into the microphone, announcing Lucius as the grand winner. The nobles surge and complain for having lost fortunes by betting against the child. The presenter raves with excitement, exalting the historic feat of the 12-year-old prodigy. Lilia bites the barrier railing, relieved, while Hector asks the girl to calm down in the box. Lucius absorbs the energy accumulated in the arena, trying to strengthen his internal circuit. The blonde boy clenches his fist, realizing that the amount of magic is still not enough. The second fight starts and Lucius eliminates his new opponent with one more well-aimed spell. The presenter vibrates into the microphone, highlighting the impressive sequence of knockouts. Desperate with the losses, the nobles start betting all their money on the boy. Lucius wins the third consecutive combat, destroying the rival's defense in seconds. The arena narrator poses, celebrating the undefeated sequence of the young prodigy. The blonde boy remains calm while gold coins fall in heaps around the field. Instructor Kathy celebrates the fortune in bets she won, leaving Lilia irritated. Hector observes the rival's victory, biting his own lip with extreme envy and fury. Lucius continues absorbing the energy of the arena, wanting to reach the necessary level. Suddenly, a sinister tremor shakes the entire stadium coming from the honor box. The boy feels a terrifying presence and stares at the top of the box with severity. Heavy footsteps emerge in the darkness, revealing an extremely powerful figure. An overwhelming purple aura takes over the box, scaring everyone in the arena. The presenter sweats with terror upon noticing the unplanned arrival of a special guest. The mysterious visitor sits on the luxury throne, observing Lucius from up there. The blonde boy closes his expression, while the shadow of the past covers his mind in the arena. The man in the red cape settles in, maintaining an imposing look over the crowd. Lucius clenches his fist with so much fury that blood begins to flow from his hands. The boy stares at the honor balcony, recognizing the figure who destroyed his past life. The light reveals the face of the great elder Atlas, displaying a cold and authoritarian look. Wrapped in pure hatred, the blonde boy emanates a murderous intention toward his enemy. The legendary Atlas observes from the top of the box, without caring at all for the boy's presence. Lucius promises revenge in silence, carving his look of pure contempt against the tyrant.